Hello everyone. We hope you're doing well. We're doing great, and we truly appreciate your ongoing support. We'd like to briefly address some comments regarding our audiobook series. Rest assured, progress is ongoing. That said, your feedback is vital. If there's a novel you particularly enjoy and want to hear more of, please let us know in the comments. Each chapter requires a financial investment, so we can only continue series that receive strong audience interest. Although we retain core names and plot lines, we make significant editorial changes to enhance clarity, pacing, and immersion. These are not simple recitations. We work hard to deliver a polished, thoughtful listening experience. Without sufficient feedback or engagement, we may need to discontinue a series. So if you're enjoying something, don't stay silent. Your input truly matters. Note, our default audio speed is 3x. If that's too fast, let us know. We're happy to adjust it. Interested in early access to unreleased audiobooks? Visit our Patreon. You'll get to experience new content before it reaches YouTube. Just to clarify, I'm a fan like you. I've purchased these novels and adapted them with care, while respecting all rights and guidelines. For updates, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, X. YouTube update: recently, YouTube flagged some of our content for including mature themes, realistic violence, and darker story elements. As a result, we've decided to stop uploading anything that violates YouTube's guidelines. If you'd like access to the full, uncut versions including the more intense or mature content, you can find them on our Patreon page, where we upload everything first. Available now on Patreon: Shattered Innocence transmigrated into a novel as an extra. Transmigrating over 10,000 years late, I was forced to become a mighty presence. I, the celestial dragon, rule the heavens through the double gate, reigning supreme in countless worlds with beast taming, Tower of God sequence strength, cultivation when you take things to the extreme. Naruto is an Uchiha with cyst. WTF, the centuries-old ancestor in our family take concubine again. Plus 18, Ichi, reincarnated in Bleach as a wizard. Thanks for listening and happy listening. The more he concentrated, the more Takuma heard his own heartbeat pumping faster due to the adrenaline, exertion, and blood loss. Holding chakra made his injured chest hurt, as though the chakra was threatening to tear his flesh and bones apart to jump out. The two sounds slowly moved closer to him and each other until they were inside Takuma's strike zone. Water style, wild water wave. Takuma sucked in deep as the chakra bubbled with vigor inside his body before unleashing a large torrent water wave that hit the two at full force from a shockingly low distance, only achievable by the fog from the hidden mist jutsu that kept Takuma's position hidden. The sound of water splashing and hitting drowned out all the others, making Takuma lose number 2 and number 3, but he didn't stop and began weaving more hand seals. Before Takuma could complete the hand seals, a voice hit his ear. It came from the opposite direction. Takuma abandoned the hand seals, letting the chakra go to waste. He skidded his boots against the ground, making ample sound, and then took a high leap into the air. There was no danger of getting sniped in the air because of the fog. Takuma weaved a new set of hand seals, and arcs of lightning buzzed around his arm, culminating in front of his palm. The lightning from lightning style, shock made a crackling noise, echoing loudly in the silent surroundings. The ugly grin on Takuma's pulled on his wound, flaring up the pain, as he dropped down from the sky and shoved the mass of lightning at point-blank range in number 1's back. It was Takuma's weakest jutsu, but it stung like hell when shoved directly into the body. Number 1 screamed bloody, and Takuma pulled out a kunai to finish the deal when he felt someone sneak behind him. He pushed number 1 and whipped back to block a dagger. The figure was once again dressed in exactly the same attire, but the clothes weren't damaged in any way. Number 4, Takuma almost blurted out, but he kept it quiet in case the assassins realized he was cataloging them by their clothes. He got no response. Number 4 swung his dagger in an aggressive dance with speed and a deadly technique. Takuma found his hand manipulated. Every one of number 4's strikes was deliberately placed in attempts to pull Takuma's hand to a position that would make a defense against the next strike difficult. It was a masterful display of precision and understanding of the human body and knife work to be able to pull it off. He had never faced such an opponent, someone with such high skill. Takuma fared well at the start, but eventually, number 4 got in a strike on Takuma's lower arm, which opened up a suite of opportunities that were immediately cashed in. Within the next couple of seconds, number 4 moved quicker than ever and left multiple minor but painful cuts across his body. As Takuma hobbled, a light green glow appeared around number 4's left hand. A feeling of fear bubbled up inside Takuma. For the first moment, he didn't realize what the glow was, but the moment number 4 stepped towards him, the recognition alarmed in his mind. It looked like a medical ninja's healing jutsu. Number 4 was a medical ninja. The assassination team had a medical ninja. The danger assessment inside Takuma's head went up 2 levels. A team with a medical ninja was a threat, and this one seemed to be proficient in combat as well. There was no way number 4 would heal him, which only meant that number 4 was trying to do the opposite. Takuma recalled a conversation with Uchiha Kano about how, with some adjustments, a medical ninja could turn one of their healing jutsu into something that could sever muscles and fry the nerves. Takuma couldn't afford that. But as he shifted his foot, a jolt of pain from his leg almost destroyed his balance. Takuma was sure it was number 4's skillful knife work mixed with his knowledge of human anatomy. He went for the emergency measure. Takuma threw the kunai in his hand at number 4, buying him a second, which he used to take out his lowest grade explosive tag, which he triggered instantly before throwing it in between them. The tag wasn't anchored to a kunai, so it fluttered in the air with the edges burning. It was a gambit he had used before, but this time, the stakes were higher as he had triggered the tag. He couldn't afford number 4 missing the tag because of the fog. Number 4 froze up and leaped back as the tag exploded, while Takuma could only contract into a tight fetal position, covering his head and ears as the explosive force slammed against him. Takuma was thrown away and ragdolled against the ground several times. Pain. That was all Takuma could feel. How long had it been since he had felt this amount of pain? Even the tune-in from the police force raid hadn't pushed him this far. It was in his early days of ring when he had felt so much pain when he was forced to armor less, and his defense wasn't as good as it was today, which made deep stabs and gashes common after match. He had not missed the feeling at all, but he couldn't deny that it brought a sense of strange calm. In the face of real danger, his mind was clear. Perhaps, the existential dread he had carried with him in his first and even some part of the second year of his life in this world had tempered his mental resiliency. The possibility of imminent death didn't seem as terrifying as he thought. Takuma weaved hand seals, and he felt a connection established to puddles or water around him. The liquid rose and flowed behind with a fervor, forming a large blob. He flexed his back muscles with as much pain, and 8 glorious water tentacles shot out of the blob. Takuma took out 2 more of Sango's painkiller sachets and poured the awfully bitter powder into his mouth. One of the tentacles rose and dropped a mouthful of dirty water into Takuma's mouth to help him down the medicine. He skipped double dosing to directly triple dosing himself. Takuma wished he had a soldier pill, but this was his only option. Chapter 159, 6 while moving, 7 while stationary. That was Takuma's limit with 8 tentacles jutsu. But today, that wasn't something that would work today. He was injured, and the 4 assassins had a medical ninja among them, which meant they had slightly less to worry about injuries, but even that small concession turned into a huge advantage when there was only one opponent to fight against. First order of business, take out number 4. Once the medical ninja was out, the other 3 would become more cautious, which Takuma would exploit aggressively. The tentacles rose as Takuma knelt down and placed his palms on the ground after weaving hand seals for earth tremor sense jutsu. A ripple went through the ground, which returned with tactile information for Takuma to interpret. When Takuma had first trained the jutsu, he could only see the presence of people in a 1-kilometer area. He couldn't tell their direction or their exact distance from him. The jutsu returned too much data, and Takuma only knew how to interpret some of it. Now though, after more than a year of gradually training the jutsu, he had learned to identify the direction the target was in. He still couldn't tell their exact distance from him, but that would come with more training. Takuma tuned out everything past the cross-section they were fighting in, and as he expected, there were only 4 people in his immediate surroundings. 2 of them were alone and moving slowly around in the fog, while the other 2 were huddled together. Takuma was sure one of them was the medical ninja. It was a stupid move to not move up into one of the buildings and do treatment on higher ground, but a mistake he was thankful for. Disregarding chakra consumption, Takuma weaved another set of hand seals and performed another ninjutsu. He sunk into the ground as hiding in the rock jutsu became the mode of traversal for him. Number 4 had his glowing hand placed on his chest, healing the gruesome burn injury that had scorched his skin and bruised his ribs underneath. His mask had a crack on it from the explosive tag. If he had not jumped before the tag had exploded, he would be in a much worse condition. They had the wrong intel. The target was a maniac who used an explosive tag at such close range. He knew of the explosive tag scare tactic due to its effectiveness, but it didn't involve actually triggering the tag. The moment he had seen the burning tag, every instinct and logical mental process had made him jump away, which was the correct decision. The target will be heavily injured, he whispered. Understood, number 3 replied. Can you proceed without healing? Asked number 4. Number 3 had taken ninjutsu into the back, which required treatment, but with the target injured, they could finish the mission now and handle the injuries later. Affirmative, said number 3. Number 4 judged that his injuries were not stabilized, and he could proceed for now. His skin still hurt, and his ribs were still painful, but it wasn't the pain amount he couldn't shrug off. As he stood up, a drop of water hit his bare chest, making him alert, only to realize that it was rain. Rain, he whispered. They were having a difficult time with the hidden mist jutsu. They didn't have any wind-style users, they couldn't blow it away, Neither did they have water-style users to override the mist. But if it rained, the mist would naturally weigh down, eliminating visibility-reducing fog. Number 4 almost immediately trashed the plan as he couldn't predict the intensity of rain, and depending on uncontrollable natural phenomena wasn't wise. They had to find the target and eliminate him. "Done," said Number 4. But as they were about to move out, they heard something. Number 4 looked down just in time to see a figure phase out of the ground. It was the target. He ejected from the ground with 8 water tentacles floating behind, each holding 2 kunai. The next instant, all 16 kunai were thrown towards him from a dangerous short range. Number 3 immediately jumped in between the kunai and Number 4. It was normal for the team to protect the medical ninja, and Number 4 weaved hand seals despite seeing the kunai dug into Number 3 despite the latter's best effect to deflect them. Number 4 knew it would take more than some kunai to take Number 3 down, and continued to weave hand seals for fire style, great fireball jutsu. But then the tentacles slithered like snakes and moved around Number 3 to grab Number 4, who felt the wet liquid water held together and partially solidified using chakra wrap around his body and more importantly his hands. Before he could complete the last 2 hand seals, his hands were harshly pulled apart. Bam! Number 4 felt a strong gust of wind and force flutter his cloak and clothes. He stared in shock as Number 3 in front of him slid down to the ground, leaving nothing between him and the target. The target was a mess. There was an ugly cut on the right side of his face, the left side was burned. His clothes were torn and burned with plenty of unsightly cuts and bruises that he and his team had inflicted. He could tell the target's condition was one push away from serious. Most would fall apart in the target's condition. He now understood why the master instructor had assembled a 4-people team for a single gain. The tentacles spasmed and tightened around Number 4's arms, legs, and torso. He tried to resist and overpower the tentacles, but the tentacles were iron chains refusing to budge. "I'll keep one alive, but that's not you," the target whispered as he thrust a kunai towards him. Number 4 closed his eyes, accepting his end. He was aware of the danger of the mission and knew that he could die on any mission. But he was honored to die on duty while protecting the Foundation, and repay the life and purpose the Lord Commander had given to him. Nothing happened in the next moment. Clang! Clang! Ugh! Number 4 opened his eyes to see 2 metal chains bound around the target's arms, who struggled against the chains. Their eyes met, and the target immediately chucked his kunai up, which was caught by an empty tentacle that struck out towards him, but before the kunai could reach his throat, the chains pulled, and the target was harshly pulled back and Number 4, bound by the tentacles, went along with him. The sudden pull disrupted the tentacle holding the kunai, lodging deep into Number 4's upper abdomen. He spurted blood out of his mouth. One of the chains rattled around the target's arm, and in a bright flash, a surge of lightning shot up the chain and electrocuted the target. The next moment, 2 arms clutched Number 4's arm and pulled him away from the tentacles. "Are you alright, brother?" asked Number 1. "Why yeah," replied Number 4. "Leave me and focus on the target." Number 1 and Number 2 put Number 4 down at a distance and disappeared into the fog. Number 4 felt wetness on his face, and a chill shot up through his spine, but then he looked up to see the fog clearing up as rain began to fall in earnest. He wanted to heal himself, but instead of doing that, he turned back and hobbled toward Number 3. They needed to finish this now. Takuma got rid of the chains around him as his body spasmed from the lightning-style jutsu. The pain in his chest was at an all-time worse as his heart burned with every beat. He was already tired from the ring fight, and now felt he could collapse at any time. He looked up as rain fell on the ground, erasing his hidden mist jutsu. His biggest advantage was no more. Takuma undid his 8 tentacles jutsu and let the water fall away. He weaved hand seals for 8 tentacles jutsu again, and this time, the water behind his back was double the previous time. The tentacles that formed from the water blob were thicker and longer than before. He looked ahead, and as the fog dissipated, he could see 2 figures, but that was only momentarily as 2 huge fireballs bellowed toward him. Takuma calmly weaved hand seals, sucked in a deep breath, and then spat out a massive water wave towards the 2 C-rank fire jutsu. Water style, wild water wave. The water met the fire, and the flames were extinguished before they could even reach halfway. The collision released a huge amount of water vapor. Takuma didn't move and observed. His gut told him something was coming, and it turned out right as thick earth spikes flew across the air. It was an earth-style jutsu, but it wasn't just that. Bright and hot flames surrounded the earth spikes. It was a combination ninjutsu. The concept was simple: use 2 ninjutsu in harmony to become more powerful than a simple sum of the original. Not all jutsu could be used together in a combination, and the 2 components needed to be compatible. For example, a fire-style jutsu could be boosted by a wind-style jutsu, or a lightning-style jutsu could cause more damage when conducted through a water-style jutsu. Incompatible jutsu like fire-style with water-style wouldn't work. Takuma knelt down and quickly formed hand seals before pushing his palms against the ground. Earth style, Earthen Dome. Takuma felt the force of the combination jutsu against his shield. He knew it wouldn't last long. Earthen Dome was a derivative of a B-rank jutsu, and unlike the parent jutsu, it lacked the repair ability. Earthen Dome couldn't be repaired and strengthened by actively providing chakra after the initial expenditure. Takuma weaved hand seals for hiding in the rock jutsu to slip into the ground. As the jutsu triggered, Takuma felt a pit in the bottom of his stomach. He was familiar with the feeling, just not during battle. Perhaps for the first time in a battle, Takuma was concerned about his chakra usage. He hadn't run out, not at all, but this was the first time he had used so much in a fight and not a single of his enemies were dead. But with the hidden mist jutsu gone, he could unleash his other specialty. Number 1 and Number 2 stared at the aftermath of their combination jutsu. The jutsu was strong enough to tear through any C-rank jutsu, and in this situation, it had also illuminated the surroundings in the form of fires and embers. "Can you see the target?" asked Number 1. "Negative," Number 2 replied. They looked at each other and slowly moved closer to the burn site. "It's okay, I'm right here." The two assassins whipped around to spot the target standing before them with his hands together, forming a hand seal. They moved to strike the target down when the situation suddenly changed. Dozens of clones stepped out of the shadows, phasing out of the grounds, jumping down from the buildings. In a couple of moments, the entire road was filled with clones of the target, and they were completely surrounded. The two straightaway put their swords away and began forming hand seals. Takuma walked towards Number 4 as Number 1 and Number 2 dealt with Ganjutsu, Mist Servant Jutsu. He had gotten really good at his first Ganjutsu. He could now create an illusion of multiple dozens of clones appearing simultaneously. Takuma felt explosions go behind him. He turned to see small football-sized fireballs fly around. The explosions were followed by earth spears. Takuma had to dodge one of them. It didn't matter how many jutsu they used, they wouldn't be able to get rid of the clones. "Use more chakra, exhaust yourself," Takuma thought as he walked away from the two trapped assassins. He eventually reached his destination, where Number 4 was slumped against the ground, healing himself. They looked at each other, and Number 4 opened his mouth to yell, but two kunai thrown from the tentacles dug directly into his throat, instantly killing Number 4. The medical ninja was down. Shatter. Takuma turned back towards Number 1 and Number 2. They broke through the Ganjutsu, and they did it fast. From their reaction to directly going for ninjutsu showed that they were deep in the thrall of the Ganjutsu. Aggressiveness was an indicator they completely believed the Ganjutsu, which made the quick escape abnormal. Unless someone else broke them out. Takuma turned to Number 4 and a tight smile appeared on his face. "You didn't heal yourself, did you?" he whispered. A medical ninja's role was to heal his teammates. Number 4 had done just that. He had healed Number 3, who had then broken Number 1 and Number 2 out of the Ganjutsu. It was an excellent decision that snowballed into more good for the team. "Good man." Takuma turned to walk away when his left leg gave away. It was so sudden that the tentacles had to prop himself to stop him from falling on pure instinct. He stared at his leg in horror, and it was shaking, but no matter how much Takuma tried, he couldn't move it at all. Chapter 160. He needed to leave his neighborhood and head to a busy main street because no help would come where Takuma lived. But to do that, he needed mobility, which he didn't have currently because of the bum leg. Takuma didn't dare look at his leg in fear the remaining three assassins would notice the glance and figure out the situation. But simultaneously, it didn't matter as they would figure it out anyway when Takuma moved. The rain was now bathing the hidden leaf. Takuma's ears were filled with the sound of the heavy showers. The rain bore down on him, making his injured body feel heavier than any ankle weight he ever had. Takuma tried to look at the situation positively as his water-style jutsu gained from the heavy rain, but the rain made the situation difficult as well. His trained ears were hindered, and every single surface in the area would become slippery. Either the first dose of Sengo's painkiller had kicked in, or his body was pumping enormous amounts of adrenaline through his blood because Takuma felt the pain dull a smidge, and his body felt more functional than it should be in his current condition. But with his foot not operational, he was in no condition to engage three trained assassins. He needed to escape. The water tentacles behind Takuma shifted as one tentacle turned thinner and longer as it slowly extended behind him, heading towards the dead Number 4. Takuma ordered the tentacle to swipe Number 4's weapons pack to replenish his improvised arsenal. It was difficult as he didn't have a good view of Number 4, and the rain only made it difficult. Takuma turned to look at his front when he noticed the three assassins move. They spread out and moved to surround him. The tentacle behind him snatched the weapons pack and retreated quickly. Takuma weaved hand seals for hiding in the rock jutsu and slipped into the ground. The urban landscape restricted his movement as building foundations underground made it so he couldn't just go anywhere. This would not have been a problem if he was at his best, but in his current condition, going any deeper than just below the surface wasn't possible. If he pushed it, He could end up buried alive beneath a city, never to be found. Takuma turned to follow the road and had only moved a couple of meters when he felt the ground shake. Takuma felt his jutsu fail, and without a moment's delay, Takuma jumped out of the ground. In shock, Takuma looked around to see number 1 kneeling with hands on the ground. Takuma recalled the earthen spikes he had faced earlier. Number 1 was an earth-style user. He had disrupted the ground, forcing Takuma to resurface. Fuck. There went that plan. He would need to take out number 1 if he wanted to escape using hiding in the rock jutsu, but Takuma was sure they, too, realized that, which was why number 1 stood a step behind number 2 and number 3 even though number 3 was the most injured among the 3. They were protecting him so that Takuma couldn't escape. As Takuma thought about what to do next, he noticed number 3 look toward number 4. It was a subtle head turn, and Takuma barely noticed it. Takuma thought about it for a moment before returning to his current predicament. As Takuma thought, number 2 and number 3 charged towards him. In a hurry, Takuma did the first thing that popped into his mind. 2 of the 8 water tentacles moved and wrapped themselves around Takuma's leg. He let his legs go limp and let his body weight be supported by the tentacles. Just treat them like feet. Treat them like feet. Just like feet. While repeating the words in his mind like a mantra, Takuma jumped back, but instead of taking a big leap, Takuma ended up with a flimsy skip. Number 2 and number 3 rapidly closed in, and Takuma had no choice but to engage them. He dug into number 4's weapons pack, and thankfully, it had a stash of kunai, which he used to arm his tentacle. Takuma felt horrible as he operated the tentacles at his feet. Without a solid base and nimble footwork, the rest of his body seemed awkward to move. It was the most awful he had felt in combat, so much so that he wanted to throw up. Number 2 swung his sword, and when Takuma went to the counter, the tentacle holding the kunai missed. The sword straight cut through the water tentacle. Takuma had to lurch back at the last moment to avoid the sharp edge, and due to the abrupt movement, he lost his balance and fell to the ground. Gah! Pain shot through his body as a deep cut got pulled from the fall. He had barely squinted for a split second, only to see number 3 stabbing his sword down towards his chest when he refocused his eyes. With pure flight instinct, the tentacles pushed Takuma to the side, making number 3 miss. Takuma's problems had just started as number 2 was ready with his next attack. Takuma didn't know what to do from his current position until he remembered he had tentacles. Like whips, 2 tentacles assaulted number 2's legs to make him stumble. Another swing from number 3 threatened Takuma's life, but he didn't miss this time and successfully contested the strike. Another tentacle got in a counter-strike into number 3's side, and Takuma was about to get a final lethal strike to the heart when he saw number 1 in his field of vision. The next moment, a shuriken came down at him. Every tentacle lurched in front to form a barrier, but Takuma knew that the shuriken would pierce through the water. He pushed chakra into the water to further solidify it so he could survive the attack. The pseudo-wall didn't deflect the shuriken. Instead, the shuriken entered the water but didn't make out the other side. Takuma didn't have the time to breathe a sigh of relief. The water tentacles moved, the shuriken floating inside moving along with them. Takuma turned the tentacles into a slingshot, flinging the shuriken out, but instead of returning fire to number 1, he aimed at number 2 and number 3 as they were more immediate threats. The 2 assassins immediately jumped out of the way of the shooting stars, but not before they could avoid all of the shuriken. Some hit them and that gave Takuma a chance to regain footing. He stood up with the tentacles wrapping around his leg. From his previous failure, Takuma was able to better control the tentacles as substitutes for his legs. He immediately headed towards an alleyway, stumbling along the way, almost falling. Even if he could move now, Takuma was nowhere near the mobility he would normally possess. Fortunately for him, Takuma knew the alleyways better than his assassins. In the night of the dark, Takuma moved through the narrow ways of the poorly planned part of the city, but today, it was all to Takuma's advantage. Not only were the alleyways narrow, but the construction companies who had built the houses had overextended the balconies beyond the assigned plots. The balconies from 2 opposite buildings had a distance that could be covered with a small jump, putting the balconies directly above the alleyways, which made the streets down below partially blocked and thus inaccessible from the rooftops. He weaved through the dark village, almost falling multiple times. But before Takuma even left the block, the moment he entered the first alleyway, he felt something. But the feeling disappeared almost instantaneously, and Takuma had too much on his mind to care. All of his attention was focused on operating the tentacles. His breathing was labored, the rain sapped the energy from his body, but he couldn't stop. He could feel the assassins on his tails, he could hear them over the noise. They were behind him on the road, they were atop the buildings, following him. It was Takuma's frequent twists and turns that were keeping him safe. He consciously kept away from main roads and kept to back alleys, knowing that if he gave them the space, they would nail him. He could tell that things were going well as he hadn't faced a single explosive tag to just blow him up, but he hoped they would use explosives or flashy ninjutsu to create some commotion. That might not have done anything in his neighborhood, but it would work now as Takuma moved toward a better part of the town. Takuma was avoiding the main roads, but his aim was a large police force precinct that would have night shift officers working in the building. The precinct wasn't accessible by back alleys, and Takuma knew that very soon he would have to travel out in the open. Suddenly, number 2 dropped at the end of the alley Takuma was halfway through. It was an alleyway that opened to a main road. Takuma got the scare of his life when he saw number 2 weaving hand seals. Time slowed for Takuma. He knew he had close to no chance of avoiding a ninjutsu in the narrow alleyway, and even if he pulled off an earth-style, earthen dome in time, the solid concrete buildings around slowed the dome construction and he would get hit. The other option was to disrupt the jutsu before number 3 completed it, but he didn't have any kunai equipped in his hands, and the tentacles didn't have enough space to build up the momentum to whip the kunai. Again, jutsu wasn't an option. Number 3 was actively operating chakra for a jutsu, which meant, in that moment, he had better control of his chakra, and again jutsu had a higher than usual probability of failing. Takuma had less than a second to make a decision, and he made one in the moment. The tentacles around Takuma's feet tightened. There was no water below his soles, and even though one of his legs wasn't working, he could still circulate chakra into it. He pushed as much chakra he could in the moment into the water tentacle and used his good leg to jump high up just before a stream of fire engulfed everything below him. The jump was pathetic. He barely jumped to a single-story height. Takuma slapped his hand on the flat surface of a balcony outside, and his training during the basic training right out of the academy kicked in, and his hand stuck to the surface like his feet would do with chakra adhesion. His arm was strong enough to pull the weight of his body, and Takuma climbed up as fast as he could. The moment his good foot was on a surface, he kicked himself up and continued his way to the top. Takuma reached the rooftop and turned his head to see number 1 and number 2 behind him on another rooftop. The precinct was just a few blocks away, which meant Takuma only needed to cross a bit more distance before he could reach his destination. Takuma didn't have the leaping strength to cross the main road and onto the rooftop across the street, which meant he had to travel by road, which wasn't optimal. By the time he went down from the rooftop, number 3 would be ready to mount another attack, and the other 2 would soon follow. But he had no choice. He had to survive his way to the precinct. Takuma turned to the front and stepped forward when tragedy struck. He slipped. Cold rain fell from the sky. Takuma's mind went blank as he found himself falling back into the narrow alleyway. He could see the future in his imagination. He would hit multiple balconies on his way down. Once on the ground, he would face number 3, who would take advantage of the situation and finish him off. Even if that weren't the case, the other 2 wouldn't allow him to live much longer. He was as good as dead. Not yet. All 8 tentacles merged into one and shot forward to wrap itself around an iron rod before pulling Takuma up and flung him into the sky. 8 tentacles jutsu wasn't meant to handle large weights. Its intended usage was to wield small weapons like kunai, shuriken, big daggers, and perhaps a sword or 2, but the jutsu wasn't meant to support heavy weights and especially couldn't muster enough force to fling someone Takuma's weight into the sky. It wasn't even meant to substitute legs like Takuma was using, but he had been pumping chakra into tentacles to increase their ability to bear weight. And in the moment he was falling, Takuma did the same. He pushed so much chakra into the tentacles that it, for a very short moment, became able to fling Takuma into the air. And because the 8 tentacles jutsu wasn't meant to be utilized in such a way, it shattered immediately. As Takuma flew in the air, he turned his body mid-flight and weaved hand seals for water style, wild water wave. Number 1 and number 2 had rushed forward and were well within the range. Water-style ninjutsu had a special feature. Most of them performed significantly well when there was a body of water present nearby or an alternate, if it was raining in the area. Takuma then ejected a wave of water, which was twice as big as the biggest wave he had ever pulled off. It wasn't just the volume, the pressure behind the water was at another level as well. Number 1 and number 2 had no opportunity to dodge and were hit by the wave. But the happiness was short-lived as Takuma fell to the ground violently, missing the opportunity to do a roll to kill the momentum. Fortunately, his body was much stronger than a normal human. Unfortunately, he was in bad shape, and even the fall from a height that Takuma wouldn't feel in his knees sent a wave of weakness throughout his body. Takuma groaned, and before even attempting to get up, he weaved hand seals for 8 tentacles through the pain. The water collected from the puddles and rain pulled together in front of his chest. 2 tentacles sprouted out and wrapped around his legs. As he forced himself to stand up, the water blob moved from his front to his back before 6 more tentacles spread out. Each tentacle felt as heavy as lead. He knew his condition was worsening, and he didn't have enough time. His body would give out before he ran out of chakra. He heard footsteps, and when he looked up, the 3 assassins stood around him. Chapter 161. Takuma turned around to look at the 3 assassins who stood around him at a distance. Number 1 and number 2 looked injured and hobbled. It seemed his water style, wild water wave had done a good job. While number 3 looked tired, his cloaked body had lost the sharpness it possessed before. Takuma dug into number 4's weapons pouch and realized he only had one kunai left. He brandished the final kunai, wishing they wouldn't notice it. He still had shuriken, but Takuma's mind was too tired to make a plan to create an opportunity. He was moving purely on willpower at this point. But even his addled mind realized that he wasn't getting to the precinct. The fall, while not something serious, had broken Takuma's motivation to continue on. He knew that he was going to die. It would either be on his way to the precinct, or it would be here. He looked around. They were on a commercial street. It was already late at night, and the heavy rain had the street without any people. Takuma and the 3 assassins were the only ones left. There was a chance here that someone would contact the police force, unlike his neighborhood where no one would even think about doing anything even close to that. If he was going to lose his life, it would be while taking the 3 assassins with him instead of trying to make a run for the precinct and allowing the assassins a chance to escape after they kill him. However, as Takuma raised his arms up, he noticed how none of them moved forward. It was strange. Until now, the assassins had been more aggressive than him. They had pursued, surrounded, and attacked him like hunters going after a prized prey. That aggression was now missing. With one of his legs not working, which Takuma was sure they had already noticed, it was the perfect opportunity for number 1 and number 2 to cast a combination jutsu and take him out for good. They even had number 3's support this time around. You don't have the chakra, do you?" he muttered. Takuma didn't know if they heard him over the rain, but he assumed they did. The realization made him chuckle. Number 3 probably had exhausted himself after the fire-style jutsu from just before, and number 1 and number 2 were perhaps running low since Takuma's Ganjutsu had them use ninjutsu against an illusory army of clones. Takuma wasn't any different, but he felt he could go on for a few more C-rank jutsu. Before Minoru had praised him for his chakra volume, Takuma had never really noticed that he possessed the ability to produce a high volume of chakra. Because he never had to worry about chakra, he never paid any attention to it. Even now, after he was cognizant about the fact, he still didn't care about it as it wasn't a problem, and Takuma was busy juggling with real problems which needed solving. Today was the first time he really felt the advantage that trait provided him. But as Takuma's hopes were rising, he noticed number 3 reach for his pocket and retrieve something. It was barely visible in the faint lights from a lamp outside a shop. Takuma couldn't figure out what it was for a moment, but then number 1 and number 2 followed suit, and all 3 popped the thing into their mouths. Takuma's breath hitched when he realized what it was. Soldier pills. The faint hope in Takuma's heart shattered when he realized they had taken the miraculous combat drug. The soldier pill nourished the body and replenished the user's chakra. It was made up of powerful stimulants and nutrients that were near instantly absorbed into the intaker's body. It was said that a soldier pill could allow a shinobi to fight for 3 days and 3 nights without rest. At the end of the 3 days effect, the user is brought to the point of complete and utter exhaustion. The 3-day fact was misinformation. The soldier pill was surely effective, and it could keep a shinobi in combat-ready condition for an extended period of time. The efficacy depended upon the shinobi who ingested it and the subsequent combat they participated in. But none of that mattered because unless they collapsed in the next couple of minutes, Takuma's fate was sealed off. If the situation was dire before, it was impossible now. At least the triple dose of Sengo's painkillers was working in full effect. The soldier pills worked as advertised, and Takuma saw the 3 assassins perk up almost immediately. Number 1's and number 2's injuries were still there, but now it looked like they weren't bothering them as much. Number 3, on the other hand, looked much better from a single glance. Takuma felt a bitter taste in his mouth. The feeling of unwillingness rose from deep within, threatening to spill out, but Takuma kept it in check until he could not. Chakra made its way to Takuma's voice box, and he projected his voice. "I killed your friend," he yelled over the rain. "I murdered him like the pathetic dog he was. He died on the side of a filthy road with a gutter below him where he belonged. He should be grateful to me because I gave him a better death than he deserves. After I'm done with all of you, I'm going to go back to his body and piss on it. Just for the fucking fun of it, and I would enjoy every single moment of it. I'll make sure that the medical ninja open every single part of his body when they do an autopsy so that by the end of it, his body isn't recognizable from before, and then I'm going to dump the bloody mess into a ditch, never to see a grave or a funeral." Takuma felt his elation rise as he spat out the venomous words. It was clear from how well the 4 assassins worked that they had trained together for a long time, and it wasn't a reach to assume they were close. The camaraderie was built easily when people shed blood, sweat, and tears together. He felt the burden on his heart lift with every single jibe. He noticed a movement from number 3. His body language had visibly changed. The man was holding back his rage, but some of it was leaking out. Takuma pointed at number 3 with his kunai. "And all of it will be because of all of you. You couldn't protect your medical ninja, you let him die. You're a pathetic excuse of a shinobi, A scum who couldn't protect his friend, or maybe he was just a tool for you to use, a disposable pawn ready to be exchanged by another one. What a pathetic way to go, and yet so fitting. Number 3 charged Takuma with the anger of 100 bulls with his sword bearing. Takuma could barely stumble back a step when Number 3 invaded his personal space and swung his sword. The blade sliced through Takuma's lower torso, leaving a deep gash in his side. Takuma screamed in pure agony but grabbed Number 3 by the shoulder before punching out with a chakra-augmented fist that sent Number 3 flying in the air, but the trained assassin landed on his feet like a cat and charged back in immediately. "Sho!" Number 1 suddenly yelled. "On your shoulder." Number 3 didn't seem to hear Number 1 or directly ignored his call, his hate-filled eyes focused solely on Takuma. Boom. An explosive tag on Number 3's shoulder went off, and the man's head and upper torso exploded like a watermelon. Chunks of blown-up human hit Takuma on his face, but he ignored it and began laughing through the coldness spreading through his body. "It looks like they were friends," said Takuma. That was Takuma's last explosive tag. "At least now they're together. Aren't I a generous assassination target?" Number 1 and Number 2 were staring at Number 3's remains, shocked, so they didn't react when Takuma was weaving hand seals, and by the time they looked up, it was already too late. Ganjutsu, Mist Servant Jutsu. All but 3 tentacles retreated behind Takuma's back. 2 of them remained around Takuma's leg while the final one traveled along the road to retrieve Number 3's sword. He then slowly dragged himself around the 2 assassins as they moved around as though fighting a horde of enemies, even though there was nothing in the vicinity. After Number 3's final attack, Takuma was in no condition to physically run. His control over the tentacles was slipping, and he knew that if he tried to push it, the Ganjutsu would break. The chances of that happening were even higher as Number 1 and Number 2 were under the same Ganjutsu a short while ago. He had to be nearby and focused on keeping the 2 under the Ganjutsu. He observed the 2. It only took a moment for Number 2 to use an earth-style jutsu. The moment that happened, Takuma slowly sneaked behind Number 2. There was a high probability that Number 2 wouldn't follow up with another ninjutsu immediately after the first one, and Number 1 was fighting his own imaginary horde. By the time Takuma made his way towards Number 2, his vision was blurred, he could no longer even hear the rain properly, and his body had gone numb from the cold. The sword in his hands felt like a heavy warhammer, but his fingers had lost all sensation, so his sight was the only way to tell that he was still gripping the sword. Takuma clutched the sword, and summoning all of his strength, he swung the sword for Number 2's neck, putting his body weight behind it. The sword sliced through 1/3 out of 4th of Number 2's neck but got stuck because Takuma didn't even have enough strength to swing properly. But that was enough to end Number 2. His body fell to the ground. Takuma tried to pull the sword out, but it refused to budge. After a pull or two, Takuma let the sword go and moved towards Number 1, but one step was all he could do as he lost all control over his body and fell down next to Number 2 on the road as the rain poured down at him. The 8 tentacles immediately failed, and with it went the Ganjutsu over Number 1. Number 1, the sole remaining assassin, snapped out the Ganjutsu and hurriedly looked towards Number 2 to see his partner dead on the ground with Takuma lying down beside him. For a moment, the assassin stood there in silence, staring at Number 2, but after a long 10 seconds, Number 1 walked towards Takuma with his sword in hand. He silently stared at Takuma for a moment before kicking him face up. Number 1 changed the grip on his sword so that the sword point was facing downward at Takuma's chest before stabbing down. But before the metal could reach the body, Takuma's arm moved, and the blade pierced through it, but in doing so, changed the trajectory, causing the sword to enter the wrong side of the chest. Number 1 hurriedly pulled out the sword for one more strike, but before he could stab it down, a kunai struck the sword. Startled, he looked in the direction of the kunai to see a group of shinobi running towards him. Number 1 turned to run away, but he unexpectedly stumbled to the ground. He looked towards his legs to see Takuma's shaking hands had grabbed his legs. Number 1 kicked Takuma's head before running away, but before he could escape, "If you have come, you better stay." A figure appeared behind Number 1, and before anyone could do anything, the figure snapped Number 1's neck. On the ground, Takuma weakly looked up to see a middle-aged man in casual clothing staring down at him. He had no energy to speak or do anything, so he did the only thing he could do and closed his eyes. Chapter 162, In a hospital staff room, I worked on a report that needed to be submitted the next day. Her day had started at 7 in the morning, and she was in the hospital for her classes by 8. She looked up at the clock, which was about to turn 11. She sighed, knowing it would already be midnight by the time she tucked herself in bed. It had been a couple of months since she had joined the medical corps after passing her exams and had started her training under Taro's father, Dr. Oishi. Her days began with classes from 8 until 1 in the afternoon, after which she would get a half an hour's worth of break before she had to volunteer in the public clinic until 3. She couldn't do much, but Dr. Oishi had told her to volunteer a set number of hours every week, so she did whatever the clinic had for her. Then, her apprenticeship under Dr. Oishi started, and she tried to heal fish for 3 hours before Dr. Oishi left at 6 in the evening. After that, I would practice for another hour before going home, but today, she was feeling tired and knew that if she returned home, she would fall asleep, but that wasn't an option as she had a report to turn in first thing in the morning. So, here she was, working on her report in the hospital. Her only reprieve was that tomorrow was a Saturday, and she only had her morning classes, leaving the rest of her day free. She completed her report and packed up to leave, but as she walked through a hallway, the double doors on the end pushed open, and a stretcher unit with nurses and night shift doctors rushed. She immediately hugged the wall to clear the way for them. The person on the stretcher was wet from head to toe with so many wounds that he looked like he had been bathed in blood. The sight was so horrifying that I couldn't move her eyes away from it despite the sheer discomfort and shock and dreadfulness she felt as they rushed past her. I wondered what sort of incident the person had been to be in such a condition because, from the direction the nurses and doctors were heading towards, they were going for an emergency surgery. Even though she was now stationed in a hospital that dealt with many shinobi cases and had been a shinobi for a few years, I wasn't used to the amount of blood and gore she had just seen, so the scene remained in her mind. I stopped in the middle of the hallway. It would be too busy during the morning, but at night, it was completely opposite. So, I was alone in the hallway with her thoughts, which were suddenly focused on the second of time when her eyes followed the patient's face. It couldn't be, she thought. I turned back to the double doorways on the other end of the hallway. Hesitantly at the start, she walked towards them. She reached the part of the hospital that had the surgical suites, and the electronic board showed that only one of them was in use. More people rushed past her towards the surgery suite. Her heart began to beat faster as she followed after them with a brisk walk, stopping herself from breaking into a run. She must have made a mistake, I told herself. Her mind was playing tricks. Nenro and Masaaki, her roommates, had told her much about their mission with him. She was horrified when she found out they had faced an experienced Chunin and infinitely relieved that they had survived the ordeal without any deaths. I reached the surgical suite, and the medical ninja and nurses were already in surgery, and she could only peek through the glass of the door. 4 medical ninjas sat in the designated places around the large fuinjutsu inscribed on the floor, which focused their medical jutsu on the patient in the middle who was currently being prepared. She couldn't see the patient's door from the glass, but the worry in her heart made it so she had to resolve the knot. I then remembered that the patient's belongings, which would contaminate a sterile room, be dumped outside. I quietly walked into a side preparation room where a set of bloody clothes, ruined chain mail, scuffed shinobi boots, and weapons pouches sat on a table. Just seeing the gear only a shinobi would wear made I hurry up. She dug through the belongings and found a soiled police force armband, which made her sift through the stuff with panic until she found a wallet. She almost ripped it apart as she opened it to find what she feared. In her hands was a shinobi identity card with Takuma's face on it. The horribly injured patient was her close friend. What had happened? Who had done this to him? 100 questions passed through her mind. She rubbed a drop of blood over Takuma's picture and ended up smearing a blood stain over his face. She clutched the card and wallet in her tightening grip. Her feet absolutely took her to the surgery suite store, and she stared through the glass. In the room, Takuma's body was covered in a translucent glowing green as his unconscious body lay limp on the ground. She couldn't hear what the medical ninja and nurses were saying, but words were being exchanged, and everyone had tense expressions on their faces. And 4 medical ninja charging the fuinjutsu seal itself showed how critical the situation was. The fuinjutsu seal was only used in most critical situations when the patient was in immediate danger of death, and even then, in most cases, only 2 medical ninja joined to operate the seal, but Takuma's condition demanded 4 medical ninja. And all she could do was stand on the outside and do nothing. I have to do something, she thought as she stepped away from the door and ran to a reception area on the floor to make some calls. The first call she made was to her teacher. Hello? Mrs. Oyaki? It's I speaking. Yes, sorry to call you so late. Can I talk to Dr. Oyaki? Please, it's urgent, I said, anxiousness dripping in her voice. Yes, Dr. Oyaki. It's Takuma. I was in the hospital when they brought him in. He has horrible injuries all over his body. They took him into surgery as soon as they brought him in. They're using the fuinjutsu seal with 4 medical ninja. If you could come in, please. On the other side of the call, Taro's dad tried to calm her down. No, I don't know what happened to him. I don't know if he was on a mission, but he could have been on a raid for the police force. But he wasn't wearing his shinobi uniform. I paused before nodding. Yes, please come soon. Thank you. I ended the call, and after taking a deep breath, she dialed one more number. The phone rang 4 times before the other side picked. Miss Kano? This side, Takuma's friend. We met once last year, Takuma introduced us. I wanted to talk to a Kunoichi medical ninja. Yes, that was me. Takuma just came to the hospital, extremely injured as though he had been in a fight. I told Uchiha Kano, Takuma's supervising officer in the police force, what she had said to Taro's dad. Takuma had introduced them last year when I wanted to talk to a Kunoichi medical ninja to know what it was like to be a female medical ninja. They had met for lunch and had a discussion, which had cleared up a lot of things for I. No, he was brought in alone, said I. Yes, I will be waiting for you. I set the receiver down and leaned against the counter. Her eyes were squinted close, and her brows joined together. There was another Kunoichi medical ninja Takuma had talked about, but that went nowhere. I tried to recall if Takuma had told her anything but realized she knew nothing about Takuma's other medical ninja friend, whom he considered to be his personal doctor. Shit. She was new in medical jutsu training, but she knew that the medical ninja operating the Fuinjutsu seal would eventually tire and could potentially need other medical ninja to replace them. It was night, and the hospital wasn't operating at full capacity, but she also knew that the hospital would arrange another medical ninja and that she didn't need to do anything but the patient was her close friend, and she would do anything in her power to help. So she called the two Chunin medical ninja she knew who would come to the hospital in the middle of the night. Taro was close to Takuma as she was, so his dad would come and I knew Kano would come if she told the Uchiha that there was no one with Takuma, meaning he wasn't on a mission, and from the picture Nenro had painted for her, Takuma was in an important position in the police force. Finally, I picked up and called home. Nenro picked up, and I told him everything about Takuma. Nenro then told her and Masaaki were coming to the hospital. Even though it had been less than 15 minutes since she had seen Takuma being pushed past her, I felt it had been hours. She felt absolutely exhausted and wanted to sit down, but her anxiousness made her pace along a hallway. Barely 10 minutes had passed when the doors on the other side of the hallway, opposite the doors to the surgical suites, opened. I looked up, hoping it was someone she had called, only to see an old man enter the hallway. I sighed and leaned against a wall. The old man stopped in front of her. "Young lady, is your name I?" he asked. I looked at the old man in surprise. He wore a navy blue Samu, Japanese loungewear, and wore gaita sandals that clicked loudly against the marble floor. "Who was asking?" asked I, suspicious. "My apologies. My name is Marabushi Kasuke. Your friend Nenro called me a few minutes ago to tell me that my student Takuma was admitted to this hospital. I came as soon as possible. May I ask how he is?" said Marabushi. I don't know, he is in surgery," said I, and told him the same she had told everyone else. She had called Nenro at last, who in turn called Marabushi, but the old man was the first to arrive. I knew of Marabushi. Takuma talked a lot about him, and his words were always full of praise. She could tell that Takuma held Marabushi in high esteem. "I see." Marabushi looked towards the doors that led to the surgical suite. "You look tired, young lady. Would you like to go home and rest? I will be here in case anything needs to be done." "No, it's okay, I will stay," said I. "Very well. Then let me go make some calls," Marabushi said with a comforting smile. The surgery lasted a full 13 hours, during which Takuma came close to death multiple times as teams of medical ninja worked hard to keep his broken body stable through extensive medical jutsu. As Takuma's friends came to know about it later, Takuma's heart had stopped by the time he was brought into the hospital, and it was a miracle that he was resuscitated. He had lost too much blood, his body was in a horrible state, and his chakra reserves were low, which crashed his body's natural ability to keep itself alive. The medical ninja who had started operating on Takuma could not improve his condition and could barely keep him alive in his fragile state. When Dr. Oishi and Uchiha Kano showed up, they couldn't immediately help due to Takuma's fragile state and had to get familiar with Takuma's condition. Dr. Oishi was added to the second team when the first team couldn't continue, but Uchiha Kano was refused outright as her expertise lay in fieldwork and her inexperience with the Fuinjutsu seals used in the complicated operations. Takuma's condition didn't improve for the first 2 hours, instead, it began to deteriorate. For a moment, it seemed that Takuma wouldn't make it out of the surgery alive. It was then two Jonin medical ninja came into the picture, especially invited by Marabushi, who then took over Takuma's operation at the 3-hour mark. Dr. Oishi joined them, marking a turning point in the operation. While Takuma's condition remained unstable for the next several hours, the highly experienced and skilled Jonin began to piece his body together one piece at a time. The problem lay within the organs which were butchered during the fight. Sometime during the night, Takuma's friends were told that an assassination attempt was the reason behind Takuma's condition. Kano reassured them that the entire police force's resources would be devoted to finding who targeted Takuma, as the police force didn't take aggressions against their officers lightly. However, by the time Takuma's 13-hour operation ended with Takuma finally stabilized enough to survive without the constant treatment by medical ninja, the situation outside had changed drastically without anyone knowing. Chapter 163, Takuma slowly opened his eyes and was greeted by such a blurry mess that he couldn't tell where he was. It took blinking dozens of times to get his eyes to focus, and even then, they went out of focus when he tried to look around. From the beige ceiling above, the green curtain to his sides, and the smell of disinfectant in the air, Takuma deciphered that he was in a hospital. He felt a rush of relief. He had made it out of the assassination attempt alive. He tried to recall what had happened, only to find that he didn't remember anything after he had taken number 2's head off. It made him wonder what happened to number 1 and how he was still alive. Maybe the precinct nearby was alerted somehow, and they rushed to save him. If that was the case, he was so happy they did, because he didn't think he would have been able to take out number 1 even if he tried his best. Now that he was awake, Takuma had to alert the nurses of the fact. But as he tried to get up, his body refused to budge. It was as if his body was pumped with lead, and Thor had put the Mjolnir on his chest to nail him to the bed. When he tried to push it, pain shot through his body. He let go and rested his body, breathing heavily with a sheen of sweat on his body. What had happened to his body? Takuma craned his neck up with great difficulty to see that he still had his arms and legs. Apart from the breathing mask on his face and a few rivs in his arm, he didn't seem to be plugged into any other life-preserving equipment, which was a good sign. If something happened to his body, his life would be over. He wanted to call out to a nurse, but he didn't have the energy to shout, so he continued to lay there on the bed. Thankfully, he didn't have to wait long as a nurse entered his room a few minutes later. "Oh my, I see you're awake now," said the nurse. Takuma frowned when he heard the nurse. "What happened to my hearing?" he asked. His ears were trained to replace his eyes under the fog of the hidden mist jutsu. He could immediately tell that his hearing was different. It was so dull that he felt nauseous. "I feel drowsy," Takuma groaned. "You're on some powerful medication," the nurse patiently explained. "You'll be fine when we take you off it." "I hope soon." "How long?" 9 days, she replied. "What? Ugh." Takuma groaned. He convulsed as pain clutched his body. "Easy now, you're out of danger, but your body still needs time to recover naturally," the nurse fixed his oxygen mask. "You were in an induced coma to protect your brain from a traumatic injury and lessen its load. Your condition became stable enough today to wake you up. How are you feeling? Any discomfort?" The nurse pulled off the sheet on his body and began checking him. "I can't move my body, and I'm drowsy," Takuma muttered. "You were ripped apart. It'll take time and physical therapy to get you back to your peak," she said. "Fuck," Takuma muttered tiredly now. There was no possibility he wouldn't lose position in the narcotics task force. "Who brought me in? My memories are hazy." "The police force brought you in." "I heard it was an assassination attempt, but not more than that." "It must have been serious. They have around-the-clock protection assigned to you?" said the nurse. "Protection? There are police force members outside your room. Can you send them in, please?" The nurse helped him drink some water before leaving to get the doctor in charge of Takuma. A moment later, 2 police force officers came into the room. It took a moment, but Takuma recognized them as Chun Inafuma and Uchiha. "Is number 1? I mean, is the last assassin still alive?" he asked. They looked at each other. "They're all dead," Uchiha replied. "Then why is there a Chun and security detail on me?" Takuma asked. "It's not every day a police force officer is the target of an assassination attempt. We must be careful until we find who is behind this," said Fuma. "Any leads?" "Which one of the fucking drug lords tried to get me out of the way?" asked Takuma. He would need to talk to Inomoto to verify if his partner wasn't the one to order the hit. "We are working on it," said Uchiha. "You can't tell me, you know," said Takuma. "I work in the narcotics task force. This comes under my purview." They looked hesitant, but the Uchiha eventually said, "We haven't been able to connect the hit to any drug lords." Apparently, no one even knew this happened before the papers blew it up. That was bad news. If they hadn't been able to pick even a rumor of the street chatter, then it meant someone had been meticulous about how they did things. Takuma didn't appreciate that the papers had publicized his incident, but it seemed inevitable. But then the Uchiha stepped closer to the bed and whispered into Takuma's body. "The bodies of the assassins have gone missing." "What?" Takuma yelled before his body clutched up in pain. The Fuma hushed him. "Be quiet, it's not public information." "How did that happen?" Takuma shivered in pain. "We don't know that information. You'll have to ask the ones handling the investigation. They will come by later now that you're awake." He had barely been awake for a few minutes, and he was already feeling more exhausted than he ever had. Not to mention, his mind was now filled with the shocking information. The assassin's body had gone missing. How could 4 bodies go missing when the police force was the first to arrive at the scene? He couldn't imagine how someone could even pull something like that off. No wonder they had 2 Chunin on guard duty. They must have been worried that if someone could steal 4 dead bodies without anyone knowing, they could finish the job with Takuma. "You're awake." Takuma turned his head and was surprised to see Ai on the door. She wore a standard hidden leaf shinobi uniform and had a book bag and lunchbox in her hand. "So, I'm at your hospital, huh?" Takuma smiled, happy to see his friend. I entered the room. "When did you wake up?" she asked with a wide smile. "Just now," Takuma said. Seeing that the guards had let Ai inside, she must have visited him before, that made him happy. "How did you know about me? Did you read about it in the papers?" "I was there when they wheeled you back in," I said heavily. "Your heart had already stopped by the time you came in. They had to bring you back." Takuma's eyes widened. Not because his heart had stopped, with his condition, that wasn't surprising, but he couldn't imagine how I had felt by seeing him in the condition he was just after the fight. It must have been horrible. "All's well that ends well," Takuma tried to sound reassuring. I smiled, looking better. "What happened?" "The guards won't tell me anything, but the newspapers are saying it was an assassination attempt." Takuma nodded. "Probably one of the drug lords whose business I harmed or someone who was worried I would come after them," he sighed. "How can you be so nonchalant?" asked I. "I would be angry if I had the energy," said Takuma before asking I what had happened in the days he was in the coma. I was an outsider and didn't know any of the insider information, but Takuma valued her opinion. And when he realized that it was because of I calling people that he was alive, he felt indebted to her. "So, what's in that lunchbox?" "I haven't eaten in ages," asked Takuma. I giggled. "It's too early for you to have solid foods." As they talked, the medical ninja in charge of Takuma walked in, and surprisingly, it was Taro's dad. "How are you feeling, Takuma?" said Dr. Oyaki. The man's smile was as kind as ever, and he even looked more scholarly in his white coat. "Tired," Takuma replied. Dr. Oyaki checked Takuma. "A few more days, you'll be fit enough to be discharged. After that, it'll be physical therapy," she said. "I hope there is no permanent damage," Takuma asked, hoping there was none. "You are healed properly, so there shouldn't be any, but we will get to know during physical therapy." Takuma wasn't looking forward to that at all. Eventually, I and Dr. Oishi left for their work, and the next visitors were the ones Takuma wanted to listen to the most. Takuma was resting with his eyes closed when he heard footsteps in his room. He opened his eyes to see Kano, but then he saw Mikoto and tried to sit up to greet her, only to be punished by the pain. Welcome, ma'am." "You didn't have to come," said Takuma. "Rubbish." Mikoto walked to his bedside and sat down on the chair. "I had to come when I heard you woke up. How are you feeling?" "I hope the medical ninja did a good job. We wanted to send our own, but we heard that you already joined in medical ninja treating you." "What can I say, ma'am? I must have done something good in my last life to have such good people care about me." Takuma was extremely emotional when I told him what Maraboshi had done. Kano sat beside her after putting a luxurious-looking premium fruit basket on the bedside table. Takuma got right to the point after the small talk. "I heard that the assassins' bodies went missing. May I know how that happened?" He reeled his words in Mikoto's presence. Takuma's swearing switch remained switched off in her presence. "After you were taken to the hospital, the bodies were sent to the nearest morgue. It was already too late at night for an autopsy. The transport to a police force facility was scheduled in the morning, but by the time transport arrived, the bodies were already gone," said Kano. "But how?" "When our officers arrived at the morgue to transport the body, the staff was surprised. According to them, some other officers had already taken the bodies. Someone had impersonated police force officers and had done it well enough that the morgue staff had let them take away the body. They had used forged release papers, and the forgery was near perfect. It was enough to fool the morgue staff who have dealt with officers before. So, someone just took 4 bodies, and no one knows where they are?" Takuma said, trying to come to terms with the ridiculousness of the situation. 4? Kano spoke up. "There were only 3 assassins." "What?" No, there were 4 assassins. I stabbed number 4's neck in a street near my house, blew number 3 up with an explosive bomb, and beheaded number 2. Don't tell me number 1 escaped?" Takuma said, a bad feeling bubbling in his stomach. "Takuma, we didn't find any bodies near your house. There were only 3 assassins where we found you. The last one was killed by a jonin who was passing," said Kano. Takuma could see the look in her eyes. She was hoping that Takuma would revise his statement. "There was a 4th one, the medical ninja of the group. I killed him first to take away their healer. And I made sure he was dead. So, he didn't just get up and leave. Someone took him. Come on." Takuma couldn't help but yell. "Do we have anything? Anything at all?" Kano shook her head. "We didn't find anything in your home, and the rain washed away any usable evidence. And then we lost the bodies," Mikoto sighed. The atmosphere in the room plummeted. Takuma felt a headache come over, and he asked Kano and Mikoto to leave. He knew Kano was there to interview him, but he was in no mood to answer their questions. And maybe because Takuma was the victim, a police force officer, and knew both of them personally, they left without insisting. If Takuma were in a better mood, he would have thanked them, but he didn't say anything when they left. Takuma asked the guards not to let anyone in except for the hospital staff, and the next time Dr. Oyaki came by, he asked him to inform them that he wasn't feeling well enough to have visitors. He didn't want to see anyone until he had time to process his information and thoughts. But it seemed that he couldn't even have that, as, in the evening, someone stopped by his room. Someone important enough that Uchiha Chunin couldn't just turn away directly. "There's someone to see you," said Uchiha. "Turn them away," Takuma replied. "It's a Jonin. He's the man who saved you." Takuma opened his eyes and looked at the Uchiha. And after a few moments, he nodded. "Let him in." It would be insulting to turn away the person who had saved him and not thank him. The man who entered the room wore a gray kimono shirt and black pants with the hidden leaf headband around his forehead. The man had spiky black hair, and his features were that of a serious man. Even though his expressions were relaxed, his eyebrows were slightly slanted, making him look like he was displeased. "Thank you very much for saving me. I'm sure I would have been dead if it wasn't for you," Takuma said. "I want to stand up to thank you properly, but unfortunately, it seems I'm not in a condition to do so. I hope you don't take offense." "Of course not. I'm fine with just your words," said the man, even though his voice were serious and straightforward. "I'm glad to see that you're awake. I hope everything's fine and you'll recover fine." "Yes, sir. I'll be fine," said Takuma. "May I know my name?" "Ah, my apologies. My name is Kanoto." Chapter 164, in an underground facility under Hidden Leaf known only to a select few, Kanoto walked down a hallway lit with yellow light bulbs nailed to the walls with a line or jutrope where his footsteps strained to be silent still made echoing noise. The facility was built deep underground, going further than any similar facility would generally be built. Because of that depth, the entire facility was reinforced against earthquakes to prevent cave-ins. The facility's purpose was secrecy, and because of the location, the whole base was covered in extremely complex Fuinjutsu seals to prevent a particular white-eyed clan from peeking in from the surface. Kanoto knocked on a door and waited in silence to get a response. He was a Jonin of the Hidden Leaf, and not many places could make him wait, but the person behind the door could make him stay as long as the latter wanted. After a moment, Kanoto entered upon getting the invitation. The room was an office without any adornments. Every room was furniture similarly in case they needed to abandon the facility, which required expedited destruction of evidence. 3 people were waiting for Kanoto in the office. Sitting in front of the desk was the master instructor, a Chunin of the Hidden Leaf who was in charge of training the recruits inducted into the foundation. He raised the young orphans and molded them into operatives beyond their peers. He was the one to mold the older recruits into loyal operatives dedicated to the foundation's mission. The master instructor was an essential part of the foundation. Kanoto remembered his own training days. He hated the master instructor with a passion. The next was Khan, an operative, who was the reason behind their current situation. The Foundation had a strict flow of information, and every piece of information was on a need-to-know basis. But from what Kanoto had learned recently, Khan was involved in the drug trade, which funded the Foundation's expenses. But right now, Khan had made the mistake that led to 4 trainees' deaths. And finally, there was the leader. The man had built the Foundation from the ground up with his 2 hands. Shimura Danzō, the Hokage's shadow, the darkness of the shinobi. The man who protected the great tree from anonymity, warding off the enemies who wanted to burn it down. Kanoto knelt down in respect and waited to be addressed. "Rise, Kanoto," said Danzō. "Yes, sir." "Progress report." Kanoto started. "The bodies of the trainees along with their belongings are disposed of cremated, and ashes flushed. We got to them before the police force could inspect them. The police force has mobilized a substantial amount of their resources for the investigation, but they don't have any leads that would lead them to us. The Foundation is completely cut off from the situation." Danzō hummed. "What about the target?" "The target was lifted from the induced coma earlier today. From my conversation with him, he's upset about the missing bodies, but he doesn't seem to know any more than the police force already knows. The trainees were careful enough on that matter." Kanoto paused before asking, "Should I dispose of the target?" "No need," said Danzō. "The matter has already attained widespread attention. If he dies now, the matter will be taken off the police force's hands and into Anbu's. It serves our interest that the investigation remains in the police force's hands." Before Kanoto could reply, the master instructor spoke up. "The target caused the deaths of 4 trainees. We have to retaliate." Danzō glanced at the master instructor, who shut up. He gave the same look to Khan. "Your decisions led to this situation. I do not blame you for going after the target, but you grossly misjudged the capability of the target, which led to us losing years of resources we put into developing 4 trainees. This mission was not a time-sensitive one, and you could have taken time to research your target and have assigned appropriate operatives, but you judged incorrectly, which led to heavy losses. Both of you will be punished for this error." The master instructor and Khan looked displeased. "Khan, you are to leave for the Land of Frost. You will be keeping an eye on the situation there and protect and develop our war interests," Danzō ordered. "Yes, sir," said Khan. The war between the Land of Hot Waters and the Land of Frost was ramping up, and it was a situation full of opportunity, but it wasn't somewhere people wanted to be. It was far from home, and the assignment there would mean working 24/7. It was a lot of tedious work of developing contacts, establishing presence in different circles, creating an information network, and other ground-level tasks. And because Khan was a Chunin, once he did all the work, a senior operative would eventually take his place once the grunt work was done. No one liked that. Danzō turned to the master instructor. "You are going on a scouting trip to replace the 4 trainees. You are to hand over the command of the training villa to Nico. She will be in charge until you return." Kanoto felt a rush of joy upon hearing the punishment. Master instructor's scouting days were past him and forcing him away from the training villa, where master instructor's word was the law, where he was the king, was the ultimate punishment. Moreover, the master instructor hated Nico, their views on training were too different, and Danzō knew what handing over command to Nico meant. "Understood, sir," said the master instructor. His face was impassive, but Kanoto could see the slight twitching on his face. Danzō asked the master instructor and Khan to leave. "Do you have any upcoming assignments that require you to leave the village?" asked Danzō. "No, sir," said Kanoto. "If any such assignments come up, you're to reject it. If there's something you can't refuse, you're to come to me, I will take care of it," said Danzō. "I want you in the village. You're to observe the Uchiha clan, but that's a secondary priority." Kanoto nodded. They already had people observing the Uchiha clan. Adding him would be a waste of resources. "Your primary principal is Shizue Uchiha. You are to watch him, document his every move. I want to know everything there is to know about Shizue Uchiha." "The full package?" asked Kanoto. "The full package," Danzō nodded. The full package not only included surveillance on the primary target but profile building on people with 3 degrees of separation from Shizue. They were going to piece together what the world looked like to the person called Shizue Uchiha. Some of the Foundation's full package missions were so successful they could predict the primary target's future decision before they had made them. "What resources will I have access to?" asked Kanoto. Shizue Uchiha was a Jonin of the Hidden Leaf, an Anbu, and a high-ranking Uchiha. He was a high-value target, which made the surveillance difficult. "Anything you need." Kanoto nodded. "When constructing your team, I want you to be stricter than our standard requirement. Keep the team small, but choose the most skilled ones. You can't let Shizue Uchiha or anyone else get momentarily suspicious." Kanoto was about to reply in affirmative when he noticed the look in Danzō's eyes. He straightened up. He knew the look meant that Danzō was asking him to listen very carefully and embed every word in his brain. "Kanoto, if Shizue Uchiha finds you, death is all but guaranteed. His eyes are dangerous," said Danzō. "You and every member of your team will undergo the full Juinjutsu, cursed sealing. Anything less than that, and he will turn you into an open book. No amount of training you have will be able to prevent him from extracting information from you. Do you understand?" "I understand, sir. I will follow all the precautions," Kanoto replied. He had his assignment. It was now time to work it. After Kanoto left, Danzō didn't immediately leave the underground facility. He was a busy man, and time was a precious commodity. Instead, Danzō took a moment to contemplate on his thoughts in silence. Shizue Uchiha. He never thought an Uchiha would be able to attain the Mangekyo Sharingan during his lifetime. He had believed that Uchiha Madara was the last one to transcend the Uchiha Dojutsu. But it seemed he was wrong, and someone had awakened those eyes again. And with those eyes in the hands of an Uchiha, a danger now loomed over the Hidden Leaf village. The person whom Danzō respected the most in this world was his teacher, Senju Tobirama, the second Hokage. He had built his way of life, and his Nindo, from the wisdom his teacher had imparted before he passed away heroically while protecting the village. Tobirama hated the Uchiha. He had shown Danzō the danger they represented. They couldn't handle their gifts. The stronger they became, the greater the threat they presented to the village. Unlike the others, Danzō saw the truth behind the cursed clan. They couldn't be trusted with their powers. And he was in the right to think that. Until very recently, the Uchiha were planning a coup against the village, and if not for the special circumstance, they would have gone forward with it. Danzō had to give it to them. They had managed to keep the coup hidden for a time longer than he thought was possible. His route had an impressive intelligence network in the Hidden Leaf village, and things of note rarely happened without him knowing it, but the Uchiha had managed to keep their intentions from him. He had only become suspicious when Hiruzen had suddenly started peaceful diplomacy with the Uchiha. In his decades as the Hokage, the old fool hadn't extended the amounts of benefits to the Uchiha clan that he had done in the surprise move. When Danzō looked closer, he could see the cracks in the Uchiha's secrecy. Something was simmering under the surface, and the Uchiha were ensuring it stayed that way. His suspicions were verified when he approached Itachi Uchiha and got rebuffed. He might be Root's leader, and Itachi Uchiha might be an Anbu, but he was still an elder and on the Leaf Council. It was insulting for Itachi Uchiha not to give him a proper meeting. That's when he knew that the Uchiha were hiding something. But even then, he couldn't find out what they were hiding. His intelligence had failed him, which was worrisome, but more problematic was the source who finally revealed Uchiha's secret. Uchiha Madara. The orange-masked figure with the Sharingan who claimed to be the ghost of Uchiha, the legendary shinobi who had founded the Hidden Leaf with Senju Hashirama. Danzō was naturally skeptical, but with the Nine Tails incident from a few years back that had set back the village quite a bit, he couldn't help but wonder if the figure was telling the truth. The man did possess the skill. He could walk into a root facility and put his operatives down without a peep just to meet with him. It was an experience Danzō hadn't had since his heydays on the battlefield. The so-called Uchiha Madara presented a gift to him in the form of information. The Uchiha clan was planning a coup. And even gave him a way to verify. When Danzō checked, he found it to be true. The Uchiha had improved their relationships with various powers within the clan and were even making moves in the daimyo's court. In return, Uchiha Madara only wanted Danzō's friendship. Danzō was no fool. The Uchiha Madara of old hated the Hidden Leaf. Danzō's every instinct could sense that the man who claimed to be the Uchiha founder held the same malice against the village. He wanted to destroy the village. Danzō couldn't let that happen. And perhaps the masked man could sense that. The masked man knew how Danzō wished to be the Hokage and extended his help. When the opportunity presented itself, he would help Danzō become the Hokage. But Danzō could tell the darkness that lurked within the man. This was the devil's offer. He was being invited to dance with the devil. Accepting it would be seeking destruction. Danzō had wanted to laugh. He was usually the devil extending the favor who knew that one day he would be on the other side of the table. He accepted the offer. He had played this game before, so he knew how to beat it. He would become the Hokage and find out the true identity of the man and then ruin him. If the man was truly Uchiha Madara, the dead were better when cold. If it were just another Uchiha pretending to be someone else, he would eliminate them. Danzō entertained the idea that if it was indeed Uchiha Madara, then that meant his eyes were the Mangekyo Sharingan. The Uchiha might be cursed, but the Sharingan was a powerful weapon and it could be better utilized in capable hands. His hands. Mangekyo Sharingan, he whispered. Another pair of those eyes were so near him in Shizue Uchiha's possession. He couldn't believe it when Hiruzen told him about what Shizue Uchiha had done. The young Uchiha had crushed the coup by manipulating his clan with his eyes. A shiver went down Danzō's back. Shizue Uchiha's eyes were powerful. It could twist minds to do his bidding, all the while making others think that it was what they wanted. What a terrifying weapon. Wasn't that perfect for him? Danzō wanted those eyes. And maybe he would get them. After all, an Uchiha in possession of the Mangekyo Sharingan was a threat to the village. And it was his job to eliminate those threats. However, it was a pity that the Uchiha clan were no longer on the warpath. If Uchiha Shizue hadn't manipulated his clan, Danzō would have had enough justification to wipe out the cursed clan from the face of the world. Danzō blamed Hiruzen. The old fool had kept it hidden from him. Danzō wasn't worried Hiruzen kept something this grave from him for such a long time. The village would be in deep trouble if the Hokage wasn't able to keep a secret, and the fact that Hiruzen had shared Shizue Uchiha's actions with him meant that the Hokage still trusted him. The Hokage's trust was a priceless commodity. It was nice to have it affirmed. Now that he knew this information, Danzō could make suitable moves. Maybe Uchiha Madara would be interested in knowing someone else had awakened the legendary eyes. Danzō wondered how the man would react. Danzō stood up from his chair and was about to leave when he noticed the file on the table. He opened it to find that it was the file on the genin who had killed 4 trainees. Takuma. Where did he know that name from? Danzō flipped through the file, and the memory became clear. It was the genin who had survived the Hidden Frost incident. Interesting, he muttered as he read the file. The child was an orphan, a ring fighter, a police force officer, Maraboshi Kasuke's protege, which was more surprising than anything. He was even learning Ganjutsu from Uchiha Mikoto and had managed to dispatch 3 similarly aged root trainees who had gone through intense for almost a decade. This Takuma was a perfect candidate for a root operative. Someone who had access to the Uchiha Patriarch's family and even had an indirect connection to the Hokage through Marubushi Kasuke would be a massive asset for the route. Alas, it was already too late. Turning loyalties through mental conditioning took time. Even if Root tried to convert Takuma, it would be a long and risky process with multiple points of failure due to Takuma's activeness in his career. It would have been optimal if they had somehow gotten to Takuma while he was in the Genin Corp and then injected him into the police force, which they had done, but their spy wasn't as successful as Takuma. Danzō closed the file. The master instructor was right. Someone had caused the death of trainees, they needed to retaliate. But not in the way the master instructor would have suggested. He had other ideas. Chapter 165, Takuma took a deep breath, grabbed the parallel railings on either side of him, and exhaled as he let his arms support his weight. He grunted in pain and extreme discomfort as he tried to walk forward, his legs and hips trembled like a newborn fawn. To relearn how to walk, something that was as natural as breathing, was a miserable experience. One more step, said the nurse beside him. Takuma had never felt humiliation like this ever before. He was a shinobi who could skip rooftops, scale mountains, and move at speeds unimaginable by civilians, but now he was worse than an infant who had learned to walk. Sweat dripped from his eyebrows as he took labored breaths. He fought the instinct to let his uninjured arms take over the weight of his body weight from his legs and let them rest, but he knew this was the only way to return to form. He couldn't wait for the day he would return to the ring and thrash opponents to the ground. He yearned for the rush. I can't do any more, Takuma said. A few more steps would be your personal best, the nurse replied. Come on, you can do it. Takuma gritted his teeth and took trembling steps. He had thought only one of his legs was screwed up, but adrenaline had been supporting his other leg and even his spine during the fight. He was aware that he would fully recover, but the journey to the destination was miserable. It didn't help that his organs were shredded in the process and couldn't handle solid food. He was on a mush diet. That's it. Good job. The nurse cheered when Takuma made it to 3/4 of the path. The moment he heard the praise, Takuma lifted his lower body up with his arms and dangled in the air, breathing heavily. He stared at the sweat drops that fell down on the mat below him. He wanted to scream. Officer Takuma. Hearing his name, Takuma turned his head to see Jonan Uchiha Sayuri, the head of the Department of Organized Crime, standing a distance away from him with 2 guards behind her. She was his boss. She was the one to greenlit the narcotics task force, and the one Takuma used in the newspaper as spokesperson whenever they did a big bust to ensure he and the narcotics task force were in her graces. Let's talk, she said. They settled in the corner of the physical therapy hall. Sayuri's guard stood a distance away from them as the two sat around a desk across from each other. I must admit, I'm surprised with your visit, ma'am, said Takuma. It's not every day one of my officers is almost assassinated, said Sayuri. The narcotics task force was uncharted territory, ma'am. We must have scared the drug lords. I see this as a positive, he chuckled. Sayuri smiled in return. Takuma could sense small talk about his health coming, so he cut it short. What's the reason behind this visit, ma'am? I'm sure this isn't just a social visit. He had been getting visits from his friends and colleagues the entire week. His narcotics task force subordinates, some colleagues from organized crime, Sengo, Iruka, Aburame Susumu from the Hidden Frost mission, the Geinin and Chunin from the Farm Raid mission. People had been trickling in to see him and it was kind of them, but he was fed up with having the same conversation again and again. Sayuri sighed as she set an envelope on the table. Takuma looked at her in confusion as he ripped the envelope. Both the envelope and the letter inside had the official seal from a Hidden Leaf Shinobi office stamped on them. As Takuma read the letter, his confusion grew. Conscription? He looked at Sayuri with a heavy frown. I am getting conscripted for the conflict between the Land of Hot Waters and the Land of Frost? Ma'am, I'm not sure if you realize, but I'm in no condition to serve in an office, much less at a battlefield. Of course, you're not being asked to go immediately. You will be deployed after you pass the standard physical, she said. Anger began to bubble inside Takuma. And why are they conscripting from the police force? Takuma asked, healing his words from jumping. Every division has been asked to send some of their shinobi to help our allies in the hidden steam. I see. But I can't go, ma'am. The narcotics task force is at a critical stage. We can't let the drug lords think that the assassination attempt has us scared. It's time for us to increase the intensity and aggressively target them to show that we mean business. My team needs me, I can't leave them right now. You must stop this order. What Takuma said was true. The narcotics task force couldn't plateau right now. But the intention behind his words was to hear how Sayuri would reply. I agree with you. Unfortunately, I don't have the authority to stop the order. We can't be seen as not wanting to support our allies. Bullshit, Takuma spat. He asked, then what happens to the narcotics task force? Who will lead it? Someone capable will replace. Is it already decided? Asked Takuma. Am I already out? Is my replacement already chosen and they're preparing to take my place in the next few days? Or has that selection process not started yet? Sayuri didn't answer the question immediately. Who is it? He asked. Takuma, you must understand. We can't allow the task force to remain without leadership. Who is it, ma'am? Chunin Uchiha Yakumi. Of course, Takuma scoffed. Uchiha Yakumi was Kano's direct supervisor when Takuma worked under her and became Takuma's direct supervisor when he established the narcotics task force. Yakumi wasn't involved with the task force, but Takuma was required to give regular reports to Yakumi so that the higher-ups were in the loop. So, it's not that you can't stop the order, you don't want to stop the order, Takuma said. He had, of course, expected it. He had known this would happen for months and had even prepared himself for it, but now that it was happening, he couldn't help but regulate his burning emotions. He didn't care if he was talking rudely to a jonin, he felt a righteous anger burn within him. Sayuri's eyes sharpened at Takuma's words. She had been passive until now, but her body language was enough telltale signs that had changed. Mind the words you use, Officer Takuma, she said. This is the department's final decision. It will be announced later today, and the decision will go into effect in a few days. And what if I ask Lady Uchiha? Said Takuma. Sayuri's eyes narrowed as she glared at Takuma. Jonin Mikoto never joined the police force. Feel free to go to her if that's what you desire, but I don't think it will change anything. She stood up to walk away but left behind a few more words. You might be her student, but she's Jonin Uchiha Mikoto. Do you think she will go against the clan to support you? Thank you for visiting, ma'am, Takuma said in reply. After Sayuri left, Takuma stood up from his chair and yelled, Nurse. Rage was a good motivator. I can ask my husband to stop the conscription order, said Mikoto, but do you think that will be wise? It had been 3 days since Sayuri had given Takuma the news. Because Takuma couldn't leave the hospital, Mikoto had to come to the hospital. At first, he wanted to transport himself to Mikoto's home, but after refusal by Dr. Oyaki, Mikoto offered to visit him. What do you mean? Asked Takuma. They sat on the chairs in Takuma's private room, which the police force was nice enough to provide for him while he recovered. Let's say that I ask him to stop the conscription order. Do you think you will be able to return to the police force and continue to lead the narcotics task force like before? She asked. Can't he revert the change in leadership back to me? Asked Takuma. He could, Mikoto shrugged, but why would he do you 2 favors? You can ask Mikoto stopped him. I can't make Fugaku do anything he doesn't want to, Takuma. I never joined the police force, so I have limited sway over their affairs. Let's say I ask him to reinstate you, he will have to go against Sayuri. Fugaku might be the clan head and the chief of the police force, but that doesn't mean he can just do anything he wants. Organized crime is Sayuri's department, he will have to give her something in return. He won't deal with her for you. You are my student, not his. Takuma bit his lip. Mikoto was right, Fugaku won't help him. Fugaku knew about his ring career, even though the man was fine with it, others would not. That was enough reason for Fugaku not to support him, it might damage his position in the clan and the police force. And are you sure you want to return? Said Mikoto. I can make the conscription go away, but because of your contract, you will have to go back to work with the police force. You will be made to work in the narcotics task force. Is that what you want? Let's say you somehow get transferred from organized crime to some other department. Do you think you will get the same opportunity as you did with the narcotics task force? And depending upon how much you pissed Sayuri, she might just feel vindictive, and release the information in your file that you so much want to keep hidden. Even Fugaku can't stop rumors. Takuma felt irked by how calm Mikoto was when talking about his career. He had known her for several months, so he knew that's how she was always, but it still irked him, even though she was making sense. So, you're saying I should just give up? I won't lie, this situation isn't optimal for you, but you can still make something out of it, said Mikoto. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you must have thought about pursuing a rank promotion soon. Takuma hesitated for a moment before nodding. He had some plans for becoming a Chunin within the next 12-month period. There was a Chunin exam in less than 2 months, but Takuma had no intention to attend. He was aiming for a field promotion. His achievements in the police force were coming along great, and he thought that if he continued to develop the narcotics task force, he would be able to rack up enough to get promoted through the police force. Because the Leaf Military Police Force was a division like the Torture and Interrogation Division or the Intelligence Division, they had certain promotion slots every year. Moreover, even individual Jonin had 1 Chunin promotion slot every year. Takuma was aiming for one of those slots to get promoted, which was why he had doubled down with the police force. His initial contract with the police force would have expired a month ago, But Takuma had signed an extension to show he was serious about a career in the police force. Mikoto knew about the extension as it had come up in one of their conversations. A Chunin exam is coming up. If you sign up now, what do you think about your chances of getting a promotion? Asked Mikoto. Not good, Takuma sighed. He was confident in his academic, combat, and survival ability. His resume because of the police force was also quite attractive. But there was a problem. I don't have a team. Geinin, participating in a Chunin exam, started preparation early. Nenro and Masaaki had started preparing when the exam was a year away. Every Chunin exam was unique, but there was one thing common among all Geinin participated in teams of 3. And those teams were locked in early as the Geinin wished to improve their teamwork for the exams. Nenro and Masaaki both had already locked their teams 4 months ago and regularly trained with them. Even Takuma's subordinates in the narcotics task force, who were participating, had already locked in their teams. With less than 2 months from the exam, Takuma was doubtful he could get on a team. And even if he did get on one, he knew it wouldn't be a good one. A bad team could ruin a Geinin's chances in the exam. Moreover, the upcoming Chunin exams were being hosted by the Hidden Rock, and that cut into the registration time because of the travel. It was already too late. If he wanted a real chance, he needed to aim for the next Chunin exam. So you can aim for the next Chunin exam 8 months from now, but you will have to work at a demoted position in the narcotics task force, which will reflect on your record, said Mikoto. Or you can take the conscription and earn war achievements. Takuma was shocked. He couldn't believe Mikoto had just told him to accept the conscription. Don't look so surprised, Mikoto chuckled. A war is a land of opportunity for a shinobi. A war is where shinobi careers take off, heroes rise, and legends are created. There's nothing more attractive than war accomplishments. Minato no Mikaze, the 4th Hokage, became the Yellow Flash in the 3rd Shinobi World War. The legend of the Sannin was minted in the 2nd Shinobi World War. Tsukumo Hatake came to be known as the Hidden Lee Village's White Fang during the 2nd Shinobi World War and later became the Jonin commander. Fugaku made himself known to the world during the 3rd Shinobi World War and became the feared Wicked Eye. Takuma unconsciously straightened up as he heard the illustrious names and titles. He had lived in this world long enough to know of the illustrious shinobi and their war accomplishments. It's obvious that most shinobi would be averse to wars due to the danger, but those who embrace it and survive are showered with rewards for their contribution. Make a mark, make yourself known, and they won't have a choice but to promote you. If you return to the police force after the war, even Sayuri will have no choice but to treat you fairly and respectfully. Said Mikoto. There's a golden opportunity in front of you, it's up to you if you want to grab it. After Mikoto left, her words were the only thing Takuma had on his mind for a very long time. Chapter 166, more time passed, and Takuma's physical status continued to improve until he was back in combat-worthy condition. Clang. 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 Takuma launched a volley of shuriken, but they were matched 1-to-1 by an opposing volley of shuriken. The shuriken had barely fallen when Maruboshi rushed Takuma, who equipped his kunai and charged ahead. The shinobi met head-on, 2 kunai scraping against each other, creating a harsh noise. Takuma sprang a palm strike at Maruboshi's chest with his free hand. Maruboshi grabbed the arm before it could hit and stabbed his kunai down at Takuma's shoulder. Takuma sidestepped the kunai and retaliated by flinging his own kunai up at Maruboshi's face at an inhuman speed with a wrist flick that Maruboshi evaded with a simple head tilt. He clenched his hand into a fist as chakra rushed forth and aimed for the liver. Maruboshi smiled with his patent ho-ho chuckle and tapped Takuma's elbow to derail the punch trajectory completely. The tap was so powerful that Takuma had to clench his core to prevent himself from spinning around. He gritted his teeth and grabbed Maruboshi's arm to disarm him of his kunai and succeeded in twisting the wrist to release the grip. Maruboshi did nothing to stop the disarm. Instead, he raised his other arm and thrashed Takuma's head with an elbow strike. Takuma felt his head churn and his neck snap down painfully. He stumbled back, shook his head, and charged back at Maruboshi with a growl. Maruboshi kicked the ground, and his dropped kunai sprang up, which he then kicked toward Takuma, who, when moving to dodge, felt a twinge in his hip. He was a moment late, and the kunai left a very faint tear on his sleeve. Takuma leaped to the sky and cocked his arm back into a fist. Maruboshi swiftly jumped away to evade. The fist shattered the ground, leaving a small crater around the point of impact. When Takuma stood up, Maruboshi was only a step away with his leg raised. Takuma crossed his arms and was sent flying back from the powerful impact. Maruboshi didn't let off the pressure and dashed towards Takuma. The moment Takuma touched the ground, Maruboshi was already there with his next attack ready. Takuma blocked a punch and caught an elbow strike, but Maruboshi smashed his head into Takuma's. Surprisingly, Takuma wasn't shaken. He whipped out a kick for Maruboshi's knee. It was a solid hit, giving Takuma hold of the momentum. He immediately pushed on aggressively with a barrage of hits with augmentations mixed in. Maraboshi fell back on defense with dodges and blocks without any signs of any counters. "Your augmented strikes are stronger than the last time we spared," Maraboshi said. He then caught Takuma's augmented punch with his hand and pushed him away before cocking back his fist. Takuma put his hand forth to catch Maraboshi's fist just as he had done, but the moment the fist made contact with the palm, Takuma felt an overwhelming force slam into him. This wasn't an augmentation. Takuma knew what that felt like. This was pure physical force. As Takuma shifted his posture to direct the force better, his knee buckled, and he was forced to kneel. He immediately jumped back when the force passed, but Maraboshi was faster. When Takuma stood up, Maraboshi grabbed his shoulder and pushed him down into an upward knee strike. Takuma felt the air escape his lungs. It wasn't a feeling he missed. He fell to the ground with pain radiating from his ribs. "Get up," said Maraboshi. Takuma spat the grass out of his mouth as he stood up. "You are slow," said Maraboshi. "And you are weaker without augmentations." He saw Takuma's hand on his lower back. "Are you not completely healed, young Takuma?" "No, I'm healed. My body is just stiff and unresponsive. I need to train to bring it back to speed," Takuma groaned. His lower back was stiff, his hip lost strength when he pushed it, and his leg got tired too quickly. "Take care of your body, it is one of the most valuable tools a shinobi possesses." I know," said Takuma before gargling a mouthful of water to get rid of the raw taste of the grass from his mouth. Takuma passed the canteen to Maraboshi and gazed at his teacher for a moment before taking out a folded letter and handing it to Maraboshi. "What might this be?" Maraboshi asked as he opened the letter. "Conscription? They are asking you to join the conflict in the land of hot waters." He looked up at Takuma. "Uchiha Mikoto thinks it's a good opportunity. War is where shinobi are made, she says." And she is right, Maraboshi handed the letter back. "It's also where shinobi end." That much was obvious. It was a war, after all. "It seems my career in the police force is over, at least for now," Takuma explained his situation to Maraboshi. "She thinks participating in the war is the best way for me to gain a rank promotion." "The Chunin exams of today didn't exist in my time," said Maraboshi. "Before the Third War, the hidden villages used to conduct the examinations for their own Chunin. Before I decided that I did not want to be a Chunin, I was aiming for a field promotion like you. So, my personal experience won't help you, but I can tell you what I have observed from other geinin." According to Maraboshi, because the Chunin exams were hosted in turn by the 5 great hidden villages, most geinin didn't go to the foreign countries as that meant incurring travel expenses at a time period. They couldn't do missions and even the basic guaranteed salary was put on hold while they were traveling outside of the village. Most geinin couldn't afford that. Young shinobi weren't known for their money management skills. Need more money? Do more missions. When it was hosted in the home village, most geinin didn't take the Chunin exam seriously and treated it as a way to luck into being Chunin. If a geinin wanted to succeed at the Chunin exam, they needed to be extremely serious, and even then, the chance was low as the competition was on another level. The best of the best from shinobi villages around the lands gathered in a single competition. Then, because of the examination's ever-changing format, some teams might suffer disadvantages depending upon the format. Not to mention, to get a chance at a rank promotion, a geinin needed a resume to support the promotion. Most geinin didn't work on their resume, so even if they somehow performed well, they wouldn't get promoted until they accumulated sufficient achievements. Performing well in the Chunin exam was always a positive, as a positive result could be added to the resume, but for maximum chance, all the preparation needed to be done before participation. "Do you think I should ask Mikoto to cancel my conscription order and aim for the next Chunin exam?" asked Takuma. "You can't base your decision upon my words, young Takuma," Maraboshi said. "I know, but I still want to know what you will have me do." Maraboshi sighed and didn't reply immediately. "I believe your time will be better spent participating in the war." Maraboshi paused. "When you were in the academy, I thought you lacked the talent. I believed if you worked hard, you could reach the Chunin rank, but that would be it." Takuma was stunned at the words. The Maraboshi he knew always encouraged him to strive for the best, to pursue constant improvement, but now he was saying that Takuma's development was limited. "I was wrong," Maraboshi smiled. "You have grown faster than I had expected, young Takuma. So young, but you have already achieved an important leadership position in the police force at that. You are strong, resourceful, and dedicated to your job. I talked to your friends and some of your colleagues when you were in a coma. They all, without exception, told me that you work too much and that you are extremely good at your job. You were demoted because you were too good and elevated your position until it could not be handled by someone in your rank." Takuma would have felt flattered if all of the work he had put in, all the sacrifice he had made to his personal life, had not led to him being removed from the place he had built with his 2 hands. When including the solo research he had done on the Meiko triad, He had spent an entire year of his life building the narcotics task force. All of that was stolen from him because of clan politics in which he had no standing. Preparing for the Chunin exam will take time and effort. You will have to find people for your team, you will have to train with them, and create a functional rapport. I'm sure you know how difficult that can be when you don't have the right people. Moreover, you will be stuck in the police force for the next 8 months. I'm assuming you will not be actively contributing any longer. Fuck no, Takuma spat. If he were going to be forced to work in the narcotics task force after being so rudely demoted, he would not put in hours anywhere near he did before. Language, child, Murabashi chided. Then you will be wasting a great portion of your day doing something you do not want to do. Why not put all the time and effort to better use? I wholeheartedly believe that you can not only better help the village by participating in the war but also help yourself better. Why dedicate time to something that will mostly become irrelevant after the Chunin exams when you can gain essential experience that will always stay with you? The only downside I can see is the danger that comes with the war. But you are a shinobi, that sort of danger will become regular if you continue to rise in rank. Takuma had been living in the world that his sensibilities had long since adapted. It would have been strange if a relative of his suggested participating in a war when he had a choice not to, but in this world, a war was perhaps simply a big career opportunity. Take your time to think about it, young Takuma. Wars aren't pretty, but you learn a lot that you can't learn anywhere else, said Murabashi. It was something Takuma had been thinking about since his talk with Mikoto, and he had grown tired of it. Every day, the option to go to war became more appealing because of what it could mean for his career, and now, with Murabashi's words, that appeal had only increased. The only thing stopping him from making the decision was the Uchiha massacre and his initial plan to stick it out, but even that had started to become doubtful. As time passed, Takuma began to doubt his blind estimates of the Uchiha massacre. What if it wasn't close, and instead, it was still a year out or even more? With each passing day, Takuma became less and less certain about whether his plan was viable, and now it was barely hanging by a thread because of how long it had been in the back of his head. Takuma sighed. It was so often he wished he had just committed to the series and watched the anime, or at least, read the manga one more time to remember more about the events in the story. There was no use lamenting something he couldn't change. But he knew he had to make a decision. So he did. He was going to participate in the war. Chapter 167. The sound of a walking cane was something Takuma hoped never became a permanent part of his life. He looked at the cane in his hand and sighed. He was fit enough to fight, but his leg was still weak. Takuma could no longer feel any difference and hadn't once leaned on the cane, but Dr. Oyaki had ordered him to carry it in case he needed it. The past month had been the most difficult for Takuma. As a shinobi, he was very particular about his body. Not being able to move in the way he wanted was more restricting than anything else Takuma had ever experienced. The experience also made Takuma realize how much he had changed from his former self. In his previous life, he wasn't physically active other than commuting on whatever sports his friends played in the evenings. He didn't ever join a gym in college, nor did he seriously pursue a sport in school. But these days, he felt restless if he didn't do enough training every day, and it wasn't just because of remaining at his peak physical condition. He enjoyed the feeling of slowly improving his physical capabilities. It had become a part of his life. He never took charge of group projects or tried to have a leadership position in the school or college. He never even joined a club or community. He didn't feel comfortable being in charge, juggling people's opinions, or being a moderator who could keep the group focused towards achieving a common goal. But after working in the narcotics task force, he didn't think of leading as something bothersome. He enjoyed the feeling when a team worked in unity. And the narcotics task force was his baby. He was personally invested that it would produce the best results possible. He was a better man than before. Someone his parents would be proud of. Alas, they would never witness this improvement. Takuma stopped in front of a building and looked at the plainly designed building, which had the highest levels of security in the Hidden Leaf. He was going to war, which meant he wouldn't be in the village for who knows how long. It was time to invest in some new jutsu. It was late in the evening, and Takuma was at home. He had a little more than a week before he had left the village, and he needed to take care of stuff at home before leaving. He had to pack all of his stuff and store it in a storage unit. Because he was leaving for at least several months, he decided not to keep renting his apartment while he was away. The landlord didn't make any fuss about it. His value as a tenant had dropped like a brick after the assassination attempt. His security deposit too had evaporated. There was a lot of work to do in very little time. He was glad that he didn't have to go to work. The bell rang as Takuma was packing up his furniture, wondering if he should sell the bigger stuff. He walked to the door and looked through the spy hole to see Ai standing in front of the apartment. Now, this is a pleasant surprise, Takuma smiled as he opened the door. I was about to say something but stopped as her eyes went to the kunai in Takuma's hand. She sighed. Takuma shrugged and invited her inside. Packing already, huh? I said upon seeing the cardboard boxes. My house used to be barren when I was in the academy. I don't know when I bought so many things, said Takuma. Only after he started to think about packing did he realize how much stuff he owned. So, what do you want to drink, hot or cold? Just water will do, said I. I'm not staying. I just came to drop your things. My stuff? Takuma said as he walked out of the kitchen, only to stop when he saw his clothes on the day of the assassination attempt. I thought the hospital got rid of them. I had returned his wallet with his essential identification cards, but he thought the other stuff was disposed of. The hospital staff asked me to return it to you. They forgot they had it stored somewhere, said I. Thank you. Takuma picked up the transparent package with his belongings. It was heavy because of the chainmail undershirt. What are you going to do with them? I asked. I don't know, he said. When I left, Takuma stopped packing and sat before the package. After staring at it for a while, he opened the package and took the clothes in his hands. They were in tatters, and the blood had turned into dried stains. The chainmail undershirt was damaged as well. I had that one for a while, too, Takuma murmured. He put them aside and reached for his weapons pouch. Because he was going to war, he had replaced his entire gear with the highest quality one he could afford. But his old weapons pouches were with him for a very long time, and because he knew how to sew and work with leather, he had customized them to his preferences. The new ones didn't have those modifications yet. Takuma emptied the pouch and turned it inside out to look at his old stitching. They were the work of a novice. He could do it so much better now. The thought brought a smile to his face. Takuma reached for the next pouch only to pause as he stared at it in his hands. The pouch wasn't his. Then it struck him. This is number 4's. He gasped and immediately started to look through. There were some ground spikes, a couple remaining shuriken, and a small dagger. Takuma pushed everything aside and observed the pouch and everything in it for a clue, and he found a couple of things that attracted his attention. First was the small dagger. The dagger was pitch black from the tip to butt except for the sharpened edges. It wasn't a standard issue shinobi dagger, it had a unique design. He checked but couldn't find a blacksmith's touch mark. The second point of interest was the pouch itself. The flap on the pouch had a snap button on it, but the stitching used to fix the button was needlessly complex. There was a star pattern around the button, which was clearly the maker's mark. I need to turn this in. But as Takuma finished the sentence, his thoughts changed. It had been more than a month since the police force had lost the assassins' bodies, and they hadn't made any progress since then. The anger and irritation from the lack of progress had ruined his mood every time he thought about it, which was every day. Takuma stared down at the pouch and the dagger. He knew what he was going to do tomorrow. The first thing the next day, Takuma entered a dinky little shop far away from the main street. The location was terrible for a business, but Takuma was a regular customer. Boss. Takuma yelled the moment he entered. Yeah, wait up. Takuma rested his cane against the counter and waited for a couple of minutes before a man dripping with sweat came out from the back room. He had dark tan skin and short hair with gray streaks on the side. Oh, Takuma. Another order so soon? Said the man as he wiped his forehead with a towel. The boss was a weaponsmith Takuma used for his weapons needs because of the lower prices than any other shop in the city. One would think that because of the price advantage, the shop would be near the main street, but the reason behind the low prices was that the boss didn't have a weaponsmith license and didn't pay sales tax to the government, which brought the prices down. Takuma was introduced to the boss and his shop during his early days in the ring, and he had been a repeat customer ever since. He had even placed an order recently to replace all the gear he thought had been disposed of. Not today, boss. I was wondering if you could help me with something else today. Takuma put down the dagger and weapons pouch on the counter. Can you tell me who made these? The boss put on his glasses and picked up the dagger. He studied the dagger from top to bottom for a while. He even tested the knife by throwing it on a random wooden board on his walls, which scared the crap out of Takuma. It's expertly made. Masterful craftsmanship. Whoever made these have decades of experience. Really? I didn't notice anything special, said Takuma. The boss chuckled. That's the point, isn't it? A weapon that feels nothing but right in the hand so the shinobi can focus on the enemy ahead. He placed the dagger down. I can't tell right now, but if you give me some time, I might be able to tell you. If this was made in a hidden leaf, I might be able to find out, but if it's from outside the village, don't expect I will be able to get anything. Takuma was fine with that, as long as he got anything, that would be a new lead he could follow. The boss took the weapons pouch as well. Just be careful, okay? Said Takuma. Those belong to one of the assassins. Oh my, boss looked at Takuma in surprise before laughing. Don't worry, boy. I will be careful. Takuma nodded. Takuma visited the boss again a couple of days later. Couldn't find who makes these, boy. Takuma sighed. He knew it was a long shot. Thank you for looking, he said. But I did find something, Boss put the dagger on the table. The hilt was removed from the blade, revealing the tang. See this? He pointed at the tang. Stamped into the metal was the shape of a tree, roots and all. This is the smith's touch mark. If you find the smith who uses this touch mark, you might be able to find who bought this dagger. This is good. This is really good, boss, Takuma smiled. Really? I mean, a lot of smiths use some version of leaf and tree as their touch mark in the hidden leaf. You might not be able to find the one who uses this one. That's the thing. Some version of leaf and tree as their touch mark in the hidden leaf, which there's a great possibility that whoever made it is in the hidden leaf. That cuts down the search radius drastically, said Takuma. Boss smiled. The police force has ruined you, boy. I won't go out looking for this, but if I come across this touch mark, I will tell you. That's more than what I can ask you, boss, Takuma nodded. He felt great. This was a lead. A promising one at that. If he could find the weaponsmith, that could lead him to who ordered the hit. But there was a problem. Takuma frowned. He had less than a week before he had to leave for the war and a lot of stuff to take care of. He simply didn't have the time to investigate. He needed help. Takuma sighed. It was time to turn to the proper authorities. Chapter 168, Takuma observed the people on the road from the rooftop cafe, sipping on a large glass of cold lemonade. There were only 4 more days before he had to leave the village for the journey to the land of hot waters. He had made it his mission to enjoy the delicacies of his hometown before he was shipped off to war for who knew how long. He had done his packing, and 2 days before his deployment, all of his belongings sans the stuff he had sold off would be shipped off to a storage unit, and he would surrender the keys to his apartment to the landlord before moving into Masaaki, Nanro, and I's shared house as a guest. In the next few days, he had planned to meet a number of people before he left. His visit to the cafe was for that very reason. He was meeting someone. Takuma felt someone looking at him. He looked to the side to see the waiter pointing him out to Kano. He raised his hand, and Kano walked right over. The cold drinks here are good. You should try some, Takuma said as Kano sat down. You should have come to the office, said Kano. Should I order you something? Takuma looked at her before sighing. I don't have enough self-control to walk into that building and contain my anger. I prefer doing it here where I don't feel the urge to bash some faces in. Kano was wearing her red shade so Takuma couldn't study her eyes, but he had known her long enough to understand that she wouldn't be offended by his words, which were obviously aimed at her clan members. But he also knew that she wasn't going to apologize for the clan and office politics, which had led to him being removed from his station. Did you bring my rewards? Asked Takuma. Kano nodded and placed a storage scroll on the table. Takuma opened it and weaved hand seals. They are real, Kano sighed. Takuma ignored her and released the fluent seal for multiple scarlet scrolls to appear on the table. The puff of smoke startled the civilians on other tables. Takuma ignored them and opened every scroll to check the contents. It does seem that way, Takuma muttered as he continued to check. The police force was in a delicate position after the assassination attempt. One of their officers was attacked at his home, and then they had lost the assassins' bodies. On top of that, they had managed to anger Takuma by booting him from his team. They were concerned by their recruitment program, which was still in its infancy. If Takuma, who was in the first recruitment batch and was by far the most successful, decided to badmouth the police force. They needed top talent in the police force to maintain the legacy, and Takuma's words could have a snowball effect. They were scared that if Shinobi started to think the police force didn't care if one of their outside recruits almost got assassinated and had even demoted him. So, after Takuma decided to accept his conscription, the police force extended a reward for his excellent service. Takuma understood the situation and recognized the hush money for keeping his mouth shut. Takuma wanted to badmouth the police force from the rooftops to placate some of his anger, but after giving it a rational thought, he decided to take the reward. He asked for jutsu scrolls. Scrolls of C-rank jutsu and above couldn't be taken out of the jutsu archives, and if a shinobi wished to study a jutsu they had purchased, they had to go to the archives to look at the scrolls. The scrolls had intensive information written on them with dozens of references to research papers, and because no stationery was allowed inside, copying the scrolls from memory was a chore. There was a niche black market for jutsu scrolls, but the discounted price wasn't enough for the risk. Both the police force and Anbu had a no-tolerance policy for the illegal trade of jutsu scrolls with extremely high punishments. Takuma's ask was simple. He wanted C-rank jutsu scrolls he could own. It wasn't an impossible ask. Bigger shinobi clans had their own jutsu archives and were known to distribute scrolls to their members. He was going to a conflict-filled foreign land and thus was losing his ability to visit a jutsu archive. He wanted personal scrolls he could study at his leisure. Takuma understood that even though the reward was from the police force, he was actually dealing with the Uchiha clan. And there were not many things the Uchiha couldn't do in the Hidden Leaf. As he had expected, they agreed. At first, Takuma had wanted them to foot the bill of a jutsu he wanted, but they had outright refused with no room for negotiation when they heard how many jutsu Takuma wanted. Takuma very unwillingly had come down to buying the scroll at a small discount from the Uchiha clan. The sale of jutsu scrolls of C-rank jutsu and above was banned. Even the clans couldn't do it, they were only allowed to distribute scrolls to their members. So, the deal was highly illegal. But that was what made it binding. If Takuma broke his side of the agreement, the Uchiha clan would screw him by sticking charges against him. And even though they had sold the scrolls to him, they were the Uchiha clan, they were the police force, they were big enough to get out of it with a slap on the wrist, something Takuma couldn't do. Everything checks out, Takuma smiled as he put the scrolls away. Now, on to why I specially asked for you to deliver the scrolls. I was curious about that as well, said Kano. Takuma took out number 4's weapon pouch. It had everything, including the small dagger inside. This is the 4th assassin's weapons pouch, the one you guys didn't know existed until I told you about it, said Takuma. Kano stared at the pouch in surprise. I didn't have enough weapons that day, so I pulled it off his body after I killed him. Why didn't you give this to us before? Because it was with the hospital until now. Takuma sighed, and my memories of the fight have gaps in it. I didn't remember that I had taken it until I saw it. He was too injured that day and even kicked in the head. Takuma remembered the fight, but some particulars escaped him. It was frustrating, but Dr. Oyaki said that his memories would return eventually, but if he wanted something fast, a Yamanaka could help. Takuma had no intention of opening his mind to a Yamanaka. Take out the black dagger from inside, said Takuma. It's broken? Kano asked as she held the separated blade and hilt. I removed the hilt. There is a smith's touch mark on the tang. Kano looked. We can track it. This is a great lead. She stopped and looked up at Takuma. You had no intention of giving this to us if you weren't going to the war, did you? Takuma shrugged. You guys lost the bodies. I looked around but couldn't find a weaponsmith with that touch mark. But the tree motif indicates that the smith might be in the village. The special stitching on the pouch flap is also an avenue you should pursue. Anything else? Asked Kano. You can't expect me to do all the work. Kano put the pouch away. I heard you refused to be there when Yakami officially took charge of the narcotics task force. You know Yakami is just doing his job, she said. My job, said Takuma, sternly. Don't you think the rest of the team would have felt better if you were there for a smooth change of command? Takuma didn't answer that one, not even a quip. Kano sighed as she stood up. Be safe out there. Wars like this one can be complex. Follow your commander's orders, and stay out of trouble. Let's have a drink when you return. All right, said Takuma. Kano nodded before leaving. His gaze followed her until she was gone. Takuma looked at the lemonade. The ice had already melted away with the condensation heavy outside the glass. Sitting on a park bench with his cane sitting on the side as he fed bread to a flock of pigeons made Takuma feel old and slow. It was a strangely uncomfortable feeling, but he already had a loaf from the nearby bakery because he had come to the meeting early and had nothing to do. He was meeting a lot of people, but he didn't especially want to do this one. Unfortunately, it was an important one. Is that cane going to stick? Takuma didn't glance at the bench behind him. He could recognize Inomoto's voice everywhere. I don't think I can pull off a cane as a fashion statement, said Takuma. I must say, I'm disappointed to hear that you are leaving. I doubted our agreement would last long, but then you started to produce results and I started to dream, said Inomoto. That's new, Takuma chuckled. Well, adding to the confidence, I thought I would continue on for at least a couple more years. Alas, you put your cart behind a horse with a short race life. At least, they aren't putting you down after you fractured your foot. Well, you might soon die in the war. Really? I mean, someone did try to take me out. Takuma threw the last piece of bread to the birds. You wouldn't happen to know who is behind that little prank, would you? Why would I try to kill my gold-laying goose? The goose died in the fable. Well, I'm not a colossal moron. Because it was you, I looked into it, but whoever it was, they didn't leave any clues behind. That they didn't. Well, if you're leaving, that means my commissions from the ring also stops. God. I will miss the returns on my investment, said Inomoto. I do have a question though. Did you meet me first or did you make time for Sango before me? Takuma smiled. I came to you first. I value our relationship. Oh, that's sweet. But I like to leave the best for the last. There it is. The conversation died as soon as it had started. Takuma and Inomoto weren't close. They were business partners connected through mutual benefit. Without that, they had no reason to associate with each other. Do you perhaps have a recommendation for a possible replacement? Inomoto asked. Well, I can refer my team to you, but I fear that they would invite you to stay permanently. Ah, that's too much hospitality for me. Takuma had no intention to give Inomoto's information to the narcotics task force. Inomoto was his asset. They would need to work with the informants the team had built since their inception, which wasn't going to be pretty. The narcotics task force was still new. Right now, Takuma didn't care about how much effort he had put into building up the narcotics task force. He couldn't care less if Yukami burnt the thing to the ground. The feeling would pass, he was sure, but he wasn't mature enough to settle his feelings quickly. I figured that. You will either have to be satisfied with your current position or find a new way to trim down your competition, he said. Being satisfied doesn't seem satisfying. Inomoto stood up. Don't go dying in the war. Maybe we can work together when you come back. I wouldn't be so sure about that, Takuma replied. Inomoto's footsteps stopped. He said, you never know. In the life we live, you never know what's going to happen. Takuma stood up as well, and for the first time in the conversation, he turned to look at Inomoto. Inomoto. If I ever find that you were behind the assassins, I am going to kill you. Inomoto stopped walking again and turned. He smiled. I don't think you'll be able to pull that off successfully, gay nin. In this life we live, you never know what's going to happen, said Takuma. Truer words haven't been said. Inomoto smiled before walking away. Chapter 169. Takuma stared at the class of children running an obstacle course. There were the few in the lead, competing against each other, the large middle pack, and the small group in the back, making up a trail. He was once in a similar situation, but it seemed so far away in the past that it looked alien to him. Thanks for meeting me here, said Iruka, standing beside him. It's okay. Sorry, I couldn't find free time in the evening. Takuma smiled at Iruka before returning his gaze to Iruka's academy class. If it were only a couple of weeks back, Takuma would have refused to set foot in the Shinobi Academy while classes were in session. He had zero desire to see Iruka's class of students. But Takuma was going away for war, and when Iruka asked to meet him, he agreed to meet him in the academy because Takuma had no free time in the evening. He wanted to see how the future of the Hidden Leaf was doing before he went away, which was why he had set up the meeting so that Iruka couldn't take him to a meal during the lunch break. He figured just seeing them from afar while he conversed with his old Chunin leader wouldn't be strange. I didn't think you would be conscripted with your position in the narcotics task force, said Iruka. Neither did I, but here we are, said Takuma as he looked at the yellow-haired ball of energy in the front of the pack. The whiskered kid was athletically superior but lacked in dexterity, which made him lag behind the onyx-haired leader after every complex obstacle, though he seemed to be trying his best to be in the first position. My superiors in the police force said it would be good for me to take some time off from my duties before they relieved me of my duties. War is not taking some time off. It will be a change of scenery for sure. Takuma looked to Iruka. How is teaching suiting you? Is it everything you imagined and more? Iruka chuckled as if he had heard a joke. Not at all. These kids, with their ungodly energy, can be nightmares if I don't handle them properly. They are a hassle and a half on a good day. He smiled, but it is indeed more than I imagined. These children are so much better when I was their age. Takuma knew that feeling. He had a cousin in middle school who was just so much smarter than him when he was that age. Kids were generally always smarter. That cane is worrisome, said Iruka. Doctor's orders. Takuma glanced at the cane he had been carrying for the last month. He didn't want to admit it, but he still sometimes felt stiffness in his lower back. It was improving every day, and even though Takuma didn't use the cane, it did give him a sense of safety. In situations like yours, the most important thing is the commanding shinobi under whom you will be serving. Did they give you a name? Asked Iruka. Yes, they did. In fact, I just got the information earlier today, Takuma said. One Jonin toward Asakasaori. Any idea who that is? Can't say I do. But if it's a Jonin, he will have Chunin under his command. You will probably be assigned to one of those Chunin. Iruka glanced at Takuma. Are you nervous? He smiled. Shouldn't I be? Takuma rolled his eyes. His relationship with his commanding shinobi and his peers was crucial. He didn't want a repeat of his initial days in the organized crime. It had taken a long time to get the people to warm up to him. And unlike the well-protected police force headquarters, his new place was a conflict-torn border. He couldn't afford a rocky start. Act and perform like when you were working under me, and you will be just fine. They will be lucky to have an asset like you, said Iruka. Your versatility will shine much better there than it ever did when you were working the same few types of C-rank missions under me. I hope so, said Takuma. So. That's the Jinchuriki, huh? Yes. And how is that side of things going? Iruka sighed. It's as you said. He's the jailer. And he is just a dumb kid. Takuma was relieved to hear that. He would have shit bricks on the spot if Iruka told him that he hated Naruto. Oh no, what now? Iruka muttered. Takuma followed Iruka's eyes to see Naruto Uzumaki running towards them with a heavy frown. Iruka-sensei. Tell the jerk that I won the race, Naruto yelled. The jerk in question was Sasuke Uchiha, who followed after Naruto with a relaxed walk. Unlike the Sasuke he had read about, the kid in front of Takuma was different. Sasuke was an aloof kid, but he lacked the coldness one would gain from a certain traumatic experience. He will gain that soon. Takuma shuttered that thought faster than it had come up. Sasuke spoke, even an idiot like you should be able to tell that the one crossing the line first is the winner. This wasn't a race, Iruka sighed. The young teacher looked like he was already tired. I wasn't looking, so I couldn't tell who won, so let's just leave it at that. That's not fair. Naruto pouted. Sasuke didn't say anything, but you could see the crease between the boy's brows. No decision meant Sasuke couldn't concretely claim he was the first. I was watching, said Takuma. All three sets of eyes locked onto him. Iruka had a pleading look, asking him to stop. Naruto looked outwardly immensely interested, while Sasuke's eyes held a subtle interest. Both of you crossed the finish line at the same time. It was a draw, said Takuma. As Takuma expected, neither looked satisfied. So, Takuma took out the secret weapon he had prepared before coming to a school full of children. Here you go, a reward for completing the course. Takuma handed each of them a chocolate each. What child didn't like sweets? The effect was immediate. Naruto jumped in giddiness as he opened the foil. Sasuke hesitated for a moment before picking up the chocolate from Takuma's palm, joy in his eyes. Thank you, said Sasuke. What are you doing here, Mr. Takuma? Takuma had been visiting Mikoto's house 5 times a week, and it was natural that he would have some level of interaction with his teacher's family. Because of the meeting time and that they met during the weekdays, Takuma had close to no interaction with Fugaku, who was at work. As for Itachi, the number of times Takuma had talked to him could be counted on one hand. The Anbu shinobi wasn't home often, but when he was, Itachi stayed away while his mother was conducting lessons. Sasuke was the family member Takuma had the most interaction, but it wasn't a lot much like his brother. Sasuke considered Mikoto and Takuma's lessons as something not to be disturbed, and the little boy was very well behaved. Takuma and Sasuke had only exchanged small talk occasionally, but nothing else. Your Iruka-sensei here was my commanding shinobi before he became your teacher. I came to talk to him, said Takuma. Mother told me you got injured on a mission. Is that why you haven't been coming to the house? Asked Sasuke. Takuma smiled. There was no need to tell a kid someone had tried to assassinate him. Yes, I had a bit of a tumble, he raised his cane. I'm alright now. Not good as your teacher here, though. Iruka shook his head with a small smile. Takuma then noticed Naruto staring at him. He had chocolate around his mouth. Is something wrong? He asked. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Takuma before his brows went up. Ah. You're the big bro who gave me the chocolate. Naruto shouted while he pointed at Takuma. Naruto. It's rude to point, Iruka rebuked. Takuma was surprised. He didn't think Naruto would remember. It was more than a year away, and they talked barely for a few minutes. That was like a lifetime away in kids' time. You met Naruto? Iruka looked surprised. Ah yes, we crossed paths a while ago, Takuma said as he gazed at Naruto. What's your name, big bro? Naruto asked abruptly. The memory of him telling Naruto to ask his name the next time flashed past Takuma's mind. My name is Takuma. He took out the bag of chocolate from his bag and handed it to Naruto. Here you go, share it with the rest of the class. He turned to Sasuke. Will you make sure everyone gets one, Sasuke? The two kids ran away to the rest of the class. A big bag full of chocolate was probably the most exciting thing to them right now. You never told me that you met him? Iruka said. I had forgotten to be honest, Takuma lied. I met him the same day you told me about my transfer to the police force. I didn't know he was the Jinchuriki when I met him. I mean, it's not like I knew what he looked like. I was just consoling a sad orphan. Takuma felt Iruka's gaze on him. He did not feel guilty lying to Iruka. You should get out of the narcotics task force before it gets bad, Takuma said before stuffing his face with a big piece of fried chicken. Risu, who was sitting across from him, raised her brow. Are you saying that because you were kicked out or because you're looking out for me? I'm afraid I can't tell right now. He had invited Risu out for dinner before he left. He wanted to thank her for all the support she had given him since day one of joining organized crime. Why not both? I won't give up my informant, so the performance will plummet after the team runs out of the current investigations. You should leverage your position into something promising like getting assigned directly under a Jonin. Let the narcotics task force be a stepping stone. Diversify and whatnot. What if I think the team can continue at the same level without you? First, I will ask you to stop lying to yourself, Takuma smiled, but then I will say I'll be happy if you prove me wrong. If the team can continue working as usual, it will mean that we were able to develop an excellent team. You say? Give yourself more credit. The narcotics task force wouldn't exist if you didn't convince people to join. The team would have been me and Minoru, and we wouldn't have made it out of the first trial month. That's true. You would be nothing without me. Risu smiled as though pleased with herself. Takuma simply smiled. You know I never asked you this, but why aren't you participating in the Chunin exams? Asked Takuma. I think most people in our batch are going for it. And it's not like you're like Taro, who didn't go for it because he was lazy. I don't think I'm ready yet, said Risu. I'm in no rush to advance the ranks. I want to take some more time to learn before I start trying diligently. There's no use half-heartedly when I'm not ready. Takuma put his chopsticks down for a moment. Chunin is a leadership position. You have been managing a team for a while now, and you have done it with great success. I personally think you're ready for the exams if you want to, but if you want to take time, sure, go ahead. He paused for a moment as he picked his chopsticks back. And well, you're a Fuma. If you do well, you will be promoted through the police force. You had to say it, didn't you? Risu narrowed her eyes. It's not my fault that I'm from a clan. Takuma shrugged and winked. Hey, your family background is a resource. It will be a waste not to use it. I would have if I had it. A good shinobi uses all the tools in his repertoire. Risu sighed and said no more. Takuma raised his hand to order more food. He had been stuffing his face for the past few days, and today would be no different. They eventually came out of the restaurant. Takuma took in a deep breath and enjoyed the cool air. The weather was nice enough that he wanted to take a walk and was about to ask Risu if she would like to accompany him when she called out to him. Takuma turned to face her, and even though he was a trained shinobi with excellent reflexes, he couldn't react when Risu leaned forward to kiss him. It was a chaste kiss that barely lasted a couple of seconds, but Takuma froze up like an ice block. What was that? Takuma exclaimed. A parting gift, said Risu, flustered, before immediately leaving with a body flicker jutsu no less. 1,000 thoughts rushed past Takuma's head as he tried to make sense of what had just happened, but he immediately shut them down. He did not want to think about it because he knew where his thoughts would eventually lead him. Screw the walk, he thought. Takuma now wanted to smoke some weed and knock himself to sleep. Chapter 170, Are you nervous? Takuma looked up from the portable charcoal grill with chicken on its way to become delicious yakitori to Taro sitting across from him. It was Takuma's second last day in the village, and he was spending the evening with his friends. Because they were all busy people and it was a weeknight, and Takuma wanted a break from going out every day to meet people, he had bought his charcoal grill and a ton of meat they could cook on the roof of the trio's house. The evening was cool, and the company was merry. Nothing Takuma could ask for more from his last days in the village. Of course, Takuma replied, keeping his eyes on the meat. Unknown land, unknown people, unknown situation, everything about it makes me nervous. But I'm not averse to it all anymore. Now that it's decided, I'm focusing on what I'm going to do there. And what are you going to do there? Asked Nenro. Takuma shrugged. The first order of business is to get all cozy with my commanding officer. Nothing is more important than to get in the good graces of the person who can decide how my time in a foreign land will go. I just hope they're reasonable. That's my boy, Nenro smiled. Takuma chuckled. He recalled the conversation he once had with Nenro about how to get on a Chunin's team. It was only a few years back, but it seemed such a long time ago. I honestly can't see myself on the front lines, Taro commented. Neither can we, I said. It's better if you stay behind a desk. Be honest with me, are they teaching you to torture people? Takuma asked with a sly grin. As I've already told you 100 times. That's not my department, said Taro. We know you're lying, said I. Taro rolled his eyes. Masaaki slathered the chicken with a special kimeki sauce. I don't think he has the stomach for it. Takuma smiled as he tended to the meat. The sound of his friends talking and quarreling was comforting. Who knew when would be the next time he would have this again? Why are you getting sentimental, you fool? Takuma? Takuma put on a smile as he raised his head. Yes. Those are done, said Masaaki. Takuma looked down at the grill, and the meat he was tending was indeed done. He removed them from the heat and put them on the common plate. He handed the tongs to Nenro and stood up. I need to stretch my legs, he said while walking to the roof's edge, leaning against the railings as he gazed at the neighborhood. The scenery wasn't anything special as the building wasn't the tallest. At least the clear sky was full of stars. You don't want to leave, do you? Takuma glanced at Taro, who now stood beside him. Of course not, Takuma replied with an unintended intensity. Why the fuck would I ever want to leave the village to go to a war? Fuck, I should have dropped out of the academy when I still sucked. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and looked back at the grill. Masaaki, I, and Nenro were still chatting around the grill, unaware of his burst out. He sighed and returned back to gazing at the stars. You had the option to defer the conscription. Why didn't you do it? Asked Taro. Because of my stupid career. War achievements and whatnot, Takuma clicked his tongue. Would you have deferred if you had the chance? I'm offended you even need to ask. Takuma would have chuckled if he was in the mood. Taro was brutally honest with his desires when it came to work. Is your career worth it to actively put yourself in a dangerous position? Taro asked. I want to say no, but yeah, it's important. Ideally, it's supposed to be an unending cycle. The further I get, the more resources and opportunities I will have, and if you have those, you can use them to get further, which will get you more. An unending cycle. Yes, but only ideally, there's always an end. The reward of the cycle is strength and influence. I want them both. I want to get stronger, and I want to be someone influential. He was only half joking about dropping out of the academy. No matter how miserable his academy days were, somewhere deep within, he always held the dream that now that he possessed chakra, he would one day become a super shinobi. The delusion of being someone special. But the reality was different. To this day, he couldn't get rid himself of the feeling of being on a small raft in a vast, unpredictable ocean where one incident was enough to drown him. The feeling had only become worse since the assassination attempt. If he had known what he now knew, he would have dropped out of the academy if possible, lived a simple civilian's life, and lived his life to the fullest until his end, whenever that was. But that wasn't possible anymore. And he no longer wanted to be a civilian. Takuma liked the current version of himself. He felt competent and skillful. He had more confidence in himself than at any other moment of his life. His identity was now attached to being a shinobi. That's all he knew how to be. It was what he wanted to be better at it. The payoff from improving at something was an addictive feeling. He felt good about himself. Being better than the next guy felt great. But by trying to progress, you're inviting more danger that comes with it. If you don't risk anything, you risk losing even more. Take the risk or lose the chance. Taro quirked his brow. Is that a shot at me? Takuma patted Taro's shoulder. Risk leads to greatness, my friend. I'm plenty great. That you are, my friend. That you are, Takuma smiled. Just having a friend hear him out vent to release the bottled-up tension was a luxury Takuma was glad to have. Now, my friends, what would you say if we were to indulge in some premium weed? Weren't you a police force officer? Asked I. I was. A deeply corrupt one. Let's have some fun. You didn't have to come, you know, said Takuma. It was 5 in the morning, and the sun hadn't risen, but the sky had lightened. Because of Takuma's injuries and rehabilitation, his deployment had been delayed. His batch of deployed had already left, which was why Takuma was going to travel alone. I had to see you off, Maraboshi smiled. Takuma had to leave early in the morning because of the distance, routes, and rest stops. He aimed to arrive at the base a day before his reporting date and familiarize himself with the location and people. Well, I was wondering if you could do something for me, Takuma asked. Of course, child. What is it? Takuma took out a tiny scroll from his pack and gave it to Maraboshi. Can you give this to Uchiha Mikoto? Please do it so she doesn't know who it came from. The scroll was a simple letter written with a typewriter, so his handwriting couldn't be traced, and he even ensured through multiple drafts that his writing style was significantly different. Out of everyone Takuma knew, Maraboshi was the most capable one for the task. Whatever is in this scroll, you don't want her to know it came from you? Maraboshi held the scroll up. Takuma nodded. May I know what it is inside? Takuma shook his head. It's better that you have no connection at all. You have to ensure that she or the Uchiha clan doesn't know that you were in any way involved. As far as she is concerned, the scroll one day made it into her hands, and trying to find the source ends up in a dead end. Can you do it? Asked Takuma. If Maraboshi refused, Takuma would stop in a town nearby. Use the transformation jutsu to change his appearance and then approach a kid on the street to mail the scroll to Mikoto's home address from the post office in the town. This way, even if someone tracked down the kid, they would hit a dead end because the civilian kid wouldn't be able to see through a transformation jutsu. The problem was that it might not reach Mikoto that way. Maraboshi could get it into her hands without a doubt. I will deliver this scroll, said Maraboshi. Thank you, Takuma smiled. I will leave now. Take care, my child. They shared a hug before Takuma stepped out of the iconic gates to the original Hidden Leaf before it was expanded outwards as the population needed more housing and infrastructure. With every step he took away from, the feeling of unease grew. He had left the Hidden Leaf plenty of times for hikes, wilderness stays, and missions, but this time, it was different. As he left, it hit him that he didn't have a home to return home to. He had been living with his friends as their guest for the past few days, but it was only then he realized that even if he turned back now, he wouldn't have a home to return. Not only that, he had also sold a lot of his furniture and belongings. His leave this time meant he wasn't returning for a few months at the least to a couple of years at most. No matter what, this was going to be the longest time he was going to leave the Hidden Leaf, a place Takuma considered to be his home and safe haven. Even after the assassination attempt, his opinion of Hidden Leaf hadn't changed. But now he was leaving the haven. Takuma wanted to stop and turn away, but he knew Marubushi stood there and would see his hesitation. He couldn't let his teacher, the person he respected the most, see his weakness. He clenched his fists before raising his hands to weave hand seals for the body flicker jutsu. He pushed the discomfort away and pushed ahead. The feeling would go away when he left Hidden Leaf behind, thought Takuma. At least, he hoped it would. Chapter 171, Mikoto sat in the room facing her garden as she spent her afternoon with a calm flower arrangement session. For the past year, her afternoons had been occupied with her lessons with Takuma, but since the incident 2 months ago, that had came to a stop, and her days had returned to what they were before Takuma was a daily guest in her home. But things had changed as well. Her sons had grown up. Itachi was no longer the child he was when Sasuke was born, and since his assignment to Aunt Boo, her eldest son was never at home during the day. Sasuke, on the other hand, recently spent most of his weekends attending the clan training sessions with other Uchiha children today, though, Sasuke was out with his father. She knew what the father and son were doing. Sasuke's recent frustrations and the frequent absence of his usually never-ending energy worried her. It made her wonder if Fugaku even herself were putting too much pressure on their youngest by holding him to the same expectations set by Itachi. They were aware of how special Itachi was and that they couldn't compare him to other children, but no parent wanted to think that one of their children was in any way lesser than the other. Mikoto erased those thoughts and focused on the fragile flowers as she took a dainty pair of scissors to them. There were familiar footsteps in the hallway, and Mikoto looked to the side to see her husband turn the corner. "Sasuke?" she asked. "He went out to play," answered Fugaku. He then took out a scroll from his sleeves and handed it to her. "This came for you. There is no sender on it, but I checked for traps or jutsu, it has none." Mikoto received the scroll and was about to unroll it when Fugaku sat beside it. "Sasuke did it," he said. "He performed a great fireball jutsu today. The size of the flames and the intensity of heat. They were strong and powerful." Mikoto stared at her husband in surprise. His expressions were still stony as usual, but she could see the flecks of pride in his eyes and the slight tug on his lips that portrayed how he actually felt. "He did?" Mikoto put the scroll down. "Tell me more." She sat there smiling as Fugaku vividly described how Sasuke performed the jutsu that every Uchiha needed to master to be truly worth their clan name. Fugaku was full of pride that their son was an exemplary example of what their clan stood to be. "Shall we take him to his favorite restaurant today for dinner?" Mikoto asked. Fugaku nodded. His eyes then went to the flowers. He asked, "I heard your student left for his deployment." "Takuma? He did the day before yesterday." She sighed. "I still don't understand how Sayuri could let him go away to war. Wasn't he good at his job? He could have done good." She turned to her husband. "You could have placed him somewhere else. The police force didn't volunteer him for the war. The conscription order came from outside. They specifically asked for him. Someone must have heard about him and thought he would do well in the war. As you said, he was good at his job. If he were a Chunin, I would have agreed. But Takuma is a Geinin," Mikoto sighed. "I wrote a letter to his commanding Jonin, asking him to treat Takuma fairly. It wasn't Takuma's fault that he was deployed late, which shouldn't be held against him. That was a nice thing to do. It seems you enjoyed his company. He is a perceptive child with a knack for Ganjutsu. He is intelligent and eloquent, if not a bit rigid with his imagination. I enjoy our lessons. It's a pity that they had to end." She wasn't even able to explore Takuma's uncanny ability to snap out of Ganjutsu. If she knew their time together would be less than a year, she would have subjected him to more Ganjutsu to collect more information. "I wonder if I enjoyed them so much because I got the opportunity to teach Ganjutsu I lost with Itachi. They are the same age, they would have graduated together if Itachi hadn't graduated early," said Mikoto. "Itachi only needed to be taught the basics, and he would take it from there on his own at an astonishing pace. She had never gotten to teach him anything for long." "Where is Itachi?" Fugaku asked. "He went out shortly after you left with Sasuke." Itachi hadn't told her he was going out, but she sensed her son leaving the house. He might be Aunt Boo, but she was a war-hardened Jonin. Fugaku hummed. Mikoto knew her husband had entered his brooding phase, and it was useless to snap him out of it before he naturally emerged from it. Fugaku loved their sons, but his relationship with Itachi was not what Fugaku would have liked to have. In Fugaku's eyes, Itachi's behavior of going out on his own with his life and spending more and more time in Anbu was akin to a child's rebellion, and Itachi's disinterest in clan matters was a bad behavior to be fixed. She turned her attention to the scroll addressed to her and rolled it open. The writing was mechanical, printed on the paper from a typewriter. The first few sentences were a simple introduction that the author was an observer who had come across some valuable information about the Uchiha clan and the immediate danger the clan was in. Mikoto wanted to stop reading. Letters like these were not uncommon. People seemed to have overactive imaginations about conspiracies that they wished were taken seriously. But Mikoto was curious as to why it wasn't sent to the police force, and even if it was addressed to her, what was the reason, when Fugaku was a better choice? As she continued to read, the claims in the letter were astounding and outlandish. The author claimed that the Danzō knew about the Uchiha's plan to overthrow the Hokage and his administration and would use that as an opportunity to wipe out the entire clan due to his hatred against the Uchiha. The author further claimed that the Hokage was aware of the Uchiha's plans as Shizue and her own son, Itachi, were working with the Hokage, and the Leaf Council Danzō emphasized the author as double agents because Shizue and Itachi feared that the overthrow would fracture the village beyond return and would inevitably lead other villages to invade Hidden Leaf, leading to a fate similar to the Hidden Whirlpool. Mikoto was about to dismiss the entire thing as a madman's rambling. The author's information wasn't exactly reliable. It was outdated because the Uchiha had abandoned their coup plans months ago, and their relationship with Hokage was on an upward positive trajectory, the best it had been in decades. She also didn't appreciate that the author was calling her son a traitor to the clan. But just before she burned the letter into ashes, she noticed the word that shouldn't have been there. Mangekyo Sharingan? She muttered out loud. The letter then claimed that Shizue had awakened his Mangekyo Sharingan, and Danzō was aware of the fact and wanted the eyes for himself. Mangekyo Sharingan was a well-guarded secret. There were only a handful of people across the lands who knew of its existence. And many who were aware of it only considered it to be a story made to enhance the legend of Uchiha Madara. Mikoto and those who had progressed their Sharingan enough knew that Mangekyo Sharingan existed as it was engraved in the Uchiha tablet, but the clan had lost the information on how to achieve the eyes as no one had Sharingan advanced to decipher the Uchiha tablet, which only revealed its secret as an Uchiha progressed their Sharingan. What did you say? Fugaku, beside her, snapped out of his thoughts and looked at Mikoto and her letter in surprise. This letter. She handed Fugaku the letter. We have to find where this letter came from, Fugaku said as he stood up. Just at that moment, a shinobi Uchiha landed in their garden and immediately knelt in front of them. My lord, Jonin Shizue was found dead. His body was found floating in a stream by civilian farmers. The man's voice cracked for a moment. From his body's condition, it seems he was in a combat. And. Out with it, Fugaku urged. Yes sir, his eyes are missing. Mikoto's heart plunged as her eyes went to the scroll Fugaku had now crumpled within his first. Find Itachi, I want him at home as soon as possible, Mikoto issued the order as she rose up. She turned to Fugaku, I'm bringing Sasuke home. You better find who sent that scroll and verify the information inside. Is something wrong? Fugaku and Mikoto turned back to see Itachi standing in the hallway with Sasuke by his side. Itachi had his brows furrowed, perhaps sensing the sharp tension in the room, while Sasuke looked worried. Mom? Said Sasuke. Sasuke, go in your room and do your homework, Fugaku spoke up before Mikoto could say anything. Itachi, you're coming with me to the headquarters. Why? Asked Itachi. Fugaku's eyes glanced at Sasuke before he silently mouthed the words to Itachi. Shizue is dead. Itachi's eyes widened. He looked stunned as if the world had ended, but the emotion disappeared as Itachi steadied himself not to let Sasuke feel anything was wrong. Mikoto knew how close Itachi and Shizue were. Itachi was a genius, which led adults to treat time as their peer. They treated him like an adult. Shizue, on the other hand, treated Itachi like a younger brother. Shizue was someone Itachi could look up to, someone he could rely on. Shizue and Itachi's bond was something that transcended blood. Mikoto pursed her lips. Come, Sasuke. I will help you with your homework. Your father and Itachi have some work to do. She stepped forward and took Sasuke's hand. Mom, did I do something wrong? Asked Sasuke. Of course not, my dear. Father just has some clan business with your brother, she said. Mikoto turned to Itachi and placed her hand on his shoulder, transmitting all the warmth she could to her son. Itachi nodded to her. He knelt down in front of Sasuke with a smile and tapped his forehead with 2 fingers. Sorry, Sasuke. We will train someday later, he said with a smile. Itachi then disappeared with Fugaku. In the rush of things and shock of revelations, none noticed that Itachi's eyes had a hint of bloodshot, and if someone looked closely, the skin below his eyes were slightly red. Chapter 172, Takuma had been in the land of hot waters once, but he had only passed through the nation on his way to the land of frost. The journey was quite pleasant, even if he had nothing terrible memories of the destination. If Takuma weren't on a clock and hadn't set aside time for sightseeing because of how long it took to get the pass from Dr. Oyaki on his recovery, He would have stayed at least 2 days in a tourist spot in the land of hot waters. The lack of time meant Takuma had to rush through the country and reach the border camp where he was stationed. Takuma looked up at the sky. The sun was about to set. He had traveled during the night, but Takuma didn't want to rush because he had almost reached the camp, and pulling an all-nighter would leave him tired on arrival, something he wanted to avoid. Takuma decided he would camp for the night and then resume early in the morning to reach in the afternoon. Takuma knew a township nearby could be used as a rest point, but it meant he would be ending his journey 2 hours before he usually did, but Takuma decided to do it. Within half an hour, Takuma found the town, and the first thing he noticed upon entering was how bustling with activity and people the town was. The streets were more crowded than what he had seen in Hidden Leaf, which was surprising considering that the town wasn't the prime tourist destination, nor was the town on a major trading route, and yet, Takuma felt as though he was in a major city. It was intriguing, so Takuma asked the next shinobi guard he found. "Hey, is it like this year-round?" "Crowded, isn't it?" he asked. "Not at all. I have been living in this town for a decade, and not once have there been this many people here," said the middle-aged hidden steam shinobi. "Then what's the occasion?" "They're refugees displaced from their homes near the border. There's even a camp outside the town for those who couldn't afford to move. People have been moving westwards all year long. The war is running people's lives. It's a whole mess." The shinobi looked deeply pained. It was expected. His country was toiling in a war they couldn't fight. He turned to look at Takuma. "You don't look like you're from here, little brother. Where are you going?" "To the border." Takuma introduced himself, Hidden Leaf shinobi, joining the war to help our allies. "Oh. I did think you weren't from the country. So, you're from Land of Fire, huh? Well, allow me to welcome you to the country." They got to talking and exchanging information. Eventually, Takuma asked the man for a recommendation for an inn or a hotel, and they parted ways. The plan was to book a room, go out to have some good local cuisine, and then turn in early to start his journey early into the morning. Alas, things didn't go according to plan. "You don't have any rooms?" "Anything would do," Takuma said to the hotel staff behind the front desk. "Can't help you. There's no space left because of the refugees. I doubt you will find a room in the city for a while. This town wasn't built to hold this many people. The folks with empty rooms in their home are renting them out to the travelers because of how much demand is there for a roof," said the staff. "Damn," Takuma sighed. "If you want a place to sleep, you can't try the camp outside the town. You might get a piece of ground with a tent over your head. But be careful about your belongings, not much security. You will have to convince the shinobi there to let you in," said the staff. Takuma went to several more inns and hotels, but everything was complete. There was not a single room for him to sleep under tonight. Having run out of options, Takuma headed to the refugee camp. He had a tent of his own he could set up, but he needed a dry place, and the land of hot waters had entered its monsoon season, which had made dry land sparse. There were shinobi managing the camp, so Takuma decided to ask them if he could sleep under one of their tents. He just needed a place on the floor, and he could sleep in his sleeping bag. The camp was just an area occupied with poor quality tents with tons of displaced citizens. The atmosphere was in stark difference from the town. The camp looked destitute and impoverished. As he walked through the camp, he could see people, and they seemed to have no energy in them. The land of hot waters wasn't a poor country. In fact, it was the opposite. The country was well managed, and the citizens lived a comfortable life. But looking at the state of the camp, Takuma gathered how much the war had taken it out of the nation and how the people had been affected. He felt thankful for having first lived in a peaceful modern era, and then when he was displaced, he found himself living in the Hidden Leaf. After asking around, Takuma found the shinobi. There was a better quality tent in the back. Through the flaps, Takuma noticed a Hidden Leaf uniform, and he headed straight in. Takuma was noticed the moment he entered. "And who might you be?" asked the man in Takuma of the Hidden Leaf. "Sir," Takuma replied and showed his shinobi identification. The man smiled as he rose up to shake hands with Takuma. "What a pleasant surprise. I'm in Takashi." "What brings you here?" said Takashi. "I'm on my way to a border camp. I was wondering if I could get somewhere to sleep. I looked for a room in the town, but nothing was free. Just a dry piece of land for me to set up a tent would be more than enough." Of course, Takashi was more than happy to host Takuma. "There's no space in the staff tents, but you can stay in one of the civilian tents. You will have to share, but I will make sure the people in your tent are good folk." "I couldn't ask more of you," Takuma smiled. As Takashi led him through the camp, Takuma opened a conversation. "If you don't mind me asking, why are you managing a refugee camp? Shouldn't the Hidden Steam handle this?" he asked. "Agreed, and this camp is handled by the Hidden Steam. There are 3 Hidden Steam Geinin who manage this camp. I'm only temporarily helping them out because this camp exceeded its intended capacity." I was at Camp Husk until a month ago, and they finally approved of my return, but they asked me to manage this camp until Hidden Steam can manage the situation. 2 more weeks here, and I will return home." Takashi sounded happy. "That's good, congratulations," said Takuma. "Thank you. So, where were you stationed before this?" "Hidden Leaf." "Oh, is that the truth? I have never been to the Hidden Leaf. What is it like? Do Hyuga really have white eyes?" asked Takashi. "Hidden Leaf is a city that wakes up early and goes to sleep late. And yes, Hyuga have white eyes, quite striking if you ask me." They continued to talk about each other's home lives and the difference between their shinobi experience. Takuma noticed that Takashi didn't want to talk about his time in the Camp Husk, so Takuma stayed away from it. "Here we are." They stopped in front of a tent. They stepped inside, and as Takashi had said, there were already people inside. Occupying the tent were 2 men, 2 women, and 5 children. It took Takuma one look to deduce that 4 adults were 2 couples and the 5 kids were their children. He could even assign the children to the couples based on their looks. This is Takuma, he's a shinobi. He's headed towards the border. He will be spending the night and leave early tomorrow. Takashi was polite, but his words were firm. He was telling, not requesting. Everyone in the tent looked at Takuma before nodding. "Excellent. I would love to stay and continue the introduction, but I have work to do. Please make yourself comfortable," Takashi said before leaving. One of the men stepped forward and introduced himself. "My name is Kayase. You can sleep here," he pointed at an empty space inside the tent. "My name is Takuma. Sorry for disturbing you." The other adults introduced themselves as well. Kayase's wife Miwa, and the other couple, Kichiru and Nana. The children weren't introduced. Takuma chatted with the adults for a bit before heading back into town for some food. By the time he returned, it was mealtime in the camp. Takuma entered the tent, and the 2 families were sharing what was clearly emergency rations distributed as relief for those in the camp. Takuma was no stranger to crappy packaged food. There were military rations that he had eaten several times. Those things didn't taste good at all. And he was sure these civilian supplies were worse. "Would you like some?" asked Kayase. "No, please, have your meal in peace. I will set up my bedroll here," said Takuma. As he set up his bedroll, the one named Nana asked him a question. "You're a shinobi?" she asked. "I am. I am a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf," said Takuma as he unpacked the roll from his backpack. "But, you're so young," she said. "How can you be a shinobi?" "Young people can be shinobi, ma'am," he chuckled. If it was before he lived in this world, he would have been confused by Nana's question. In his former opinion, the world revolved around the shinobi. But that just wasn't true. Shinobi weren't ever present across the lands. They were in abundance in hidden villages like the Hidden Leaf, and they were densely present in all big cities, and important locations like border regions as a military force, but the presence of shinobi thinned as one moved away from those areas. In the deep countryside, people could go years between shinobi appearances. Shinobi were mercenary for hire, and there was not much money to be earned in the boonies. "They're sending children to war? How could they?" Miwa muttered in disbelief. "Do not worry, ma'am. I might look like I might be a child, but I'm trained in the art of combat. Both our nations want this war to end, and if they thought I wasn't right for the job, they wouldn't have sent me." Takuma smiled as he sat on his finished setting up his bedroll. Takuma looked around, and the tent was filled with what looked like personal belongings, but having just packed up his house, he could tell that the things in the tent were bare essentials. These people had left in a hurry. "If you don't mind me asking," Takuma started. "How did you end up here?" "I'm assuming it was because of the war." Kichiru nodded. 2 months ago, a shinobi came to the village, telling us to leave the village as soon as possible. They said the enemy had moved closer, and the village was in danger. Not all people wanted to leave. But we have children. He looked at the boy and girl eating together, so we left to be safe. We had to leave everything behind, said Nana. The toll of leaving her home so abruptly was clear to her. All 4 adults looked exhausted, even the children, none seemed to be older than 5 or 6, looked worse from wear. Kichiru hugged her from the side. 2 weeks ago, we got the news that the village was taken by the enemy. They don't know what happened to those who stayed behind. Takuma felt a spike in his heart. He glanced at the children. What would have happened to them if their parents hadn't made the right decision to leave? Mama? One of Nana's children looked at her. Nana hurriedly wiped the tears building up in her eyes and smiled as she pulled the boy into her lap, hugging him tightly as she whispered comforting things into his ear. All of you from the same village? Asked Takuma. They nodded. What's your plan from here on out? Asked Takuma. They had been in the camp for 2 months already. They had a roof over their head and food to fill their stomachs, but this was no place to raise children. He knew from some videos he had seen on the internet that refugees could live in camps for years, and there were even cases where an entire generation was raised in camps. He didn't want that for anyone. Some people are planning a caravan to one of the big cities. We are thinking about joining them. We don't know when this war will end, or if we ever will get to return to our homes. There will be work in the big city. We can start again, said Kayasa, his voice hopeful. It was a risky move. Leaving the camp meant no food, and there was no telling what would be waiting for them in the city. But if they were able to find work, it could indeed be a new start for the families. Their children could attend school and grow up in a decent environment. The youngest of Kayasa's children, a girl, walked to Takuma and placed a plushie in his lap. You want to play? He asked. The girl nodded. Uni, come back here, don't disturb him. Miwa said, hurriedly. It's okay, Takuma assured her. I can play. He looked down at Uni. How do we play? You don't know how to play? Oh no, what should we do? Said Uni. It's okay, I will teach you how to play. Listen carefully, okay? Takuma laughed. Even in these destitute circumstances, children were glowing beacons of hope. As long as the children were nurtured, the future was bound to be bright. Chapter 173, This is the princess, and this is her lady-in-waiting. Little Uni showed her rag dolls to Takuma. She would pick one, brush their hair, and straighten her dresses as she told him all about them. Takuma looked at the dolls in his lap. A part of him was fascinated by the stories Uni told him. They were childish and simple, but they were joyous and full of happiness. Nothing Uni said was interesting, but Takuma enjoyed listening to her regardless. Children, and this is my froggy. Uni held up a green frog crochet doll. Mommy made it. Takuma was impressed. He knew sewing for maintenance purposes, and he was pretty good at it because of how often he ended up tearing them. But he had no experience in cosmetic skills like crocheting or pattern making. Is this froggy the prince? He asked. Why would the froggy be the prince, silly? Of course, Takuma smiled. It seemed that fairy tale wasn't a thing in the world. Is there a prince or princess who this princess fancies? Yes, there is a prince. Uni looked around, seemingly looking for another doll, but there wasn't one. She stood up and ran to the bed she shared with her mother and looked around. Every moment, she didn't find her prince, was a moment her expression turned for worse. Mommy, I can't find the prince. Miwa started looking for her daughter's doll, but it seemed it wasn't in the tent. The moment Uni found that, she started crying. Maybe she left the doll in Hizuro's tent. The kids were there when we were getting the food, said Nana. Did you have the doll with you when we went out, Uni? Asked Miwa. Uni nodded, sniffling. We will go get it tomorrow, okay? Asked Miwa. I want it now, Uni murmured. Now, Uni. Don't be like this. You will get the doll tomorrow, said Kayasa. Takuma stood up. I will get it, he said. No, you don't have to. It's okay. I want to have a little walk before I go to sleep. I will just grab it on my own. Takuma didn't want to walk, but nature was calling, and he wanted to relieve himself before going to sleep. Takuma grabbed his bag and exited the tent. He liked the two families enough, but he wasn't going to leave his belongings with anyone he didn't trust. Almost immediately, Takuma was reminded why he didn't want to walk. His feet dug into wet mud that covered half of his shoe. He was lucky that he was partial to shinobi boots rather than open sandals. He sent some chakra into his soles to make walking easier and used his cane to inspect the ground, but the gross feeling of stepping into mud persisted. Takuma first went into the bushes to relieve himself. The weather in the land of hot waters was different. The country as a whole was cooler than the land of fire and much cooler than the Hidden Leaf village, situated in one of the hotter regions of the nation. And as he moved closer to the land of frost, the temperature went down. He loved the rain in general except for when he was traveling, and the land of hot waters didn't have the problem of mixing humidity with heat, which was a problem every monsoon season in the Hidden Leaf. Tonight, in particular, was bound to be a good night because of a cool post-rain breeze guaranteed to make a fantastic sleeping experience. After relieving himself, Takuma went to the tent specified by Kayasa, and thankfully, the oil lamps were still burning. Takuma peeked into the tent shared by three families and asked them for Uni's prince doll. They seemed confused at first, but when Takuma spoke of Kayasa and Miwa, they understood and handed the prince doll. The doll was dressed in clothes like those worn by the nobility from the fire capital, the fire daimyo's seat. Takuma chatted with the people in the tent for a bit before wishing them a good night. Takuma gazed at the sky as he slowly walked back to the tent. Because he was close to the border without any big settlements, the sky was much clearer. The stars were more beautiful than he had ever seen in the Hidden Leaf. It was a sight to behold. If he weren't on a journey with a clock on it, Takuma would have spent a night stargazing. Swish, a sound alerted Takuma. He looked in the direction. It was faint, but he picked it up clearly. He recognized the sound clearly, the sound of cutting through the air at high speeds with a flutter of a robe. It was a common sound in the Hidden Leaf, where shinobi used rooftops as a road system. He thought it was the shinobi managing the camp coming back from the town after dinner. Takuma decided to give them his thanks now, as he wasn't going to get a chance to do so tomorrow because he was planning to leave early at sunrise. Takuma headed for the shinobi tents. Boom. Takuma felt the air shift as an explosion went off. His instincts rang the alarm bells as screams and yells sounded in the camp. Takuma turned back to locate the source of the explosion, only to see a large fireball from Fire Style, Great Fireball Jutsu barrel through a row of tents, scorching everything in its path, leaving chakra-fueled fires in its wake. The ground shook, and Takuma saw a number of tents collapse. Arcs of lightning with flashes sparked in another part of the tent. The camp was under attack. The sounds he had heard weren't the managers. They were the enemies. Takuma ran for the woods. He all but ripped his backpack open, took out his weapon pouches before throwing the backpack into a bush, and rushed into the camp. He pushed chakra into his feet and took the air with a big leap. He easily cleared the tent tops and reached a height where he could get a look at the situation. It was brief, but enough. Mud flew in every direction as Takuma pushed himself to his destination using the body flicker jutsu. He almost slipped in the mud as he stopped in front of the burning tents. Dense smoke rose from the flames as a man dressed in black attire spewed flames and threw explosion tags all around him. Takuma almost vomited when the smell of burning flesh hit his nose. His being shook as he saw burning bodies slumped on the ground. Men and women, still alive, with their bodies of fire rolling in the mud to put out the fires on their bodies, but the chakra-fueled flames weren't easy to put out. From beneath the deep shock bubbled a burning rage as Takuma shot forward with full might. He clenched his fist as waves of chakra flooded his arm. Hey! The black-clad shinobi turned. A startling surprise crossed his eyes as he saw Takuma. The surprise made the man slow, and he couldn't avoid the punch into the stomach. The man flew back like a cannonball and slammed into a burning tent that still stood. A strong recoil almost dislocated his shoulder. It had been more than a year since he had last messed up the chakra in an augmented strike, but Takuma disregarded the dull ache and shot toward the tent. The man in the tent coughed violently. He tried to get up, but Takuma appeared above him and slammed his heel into the man's ribs, cracking them brutally. Takuma bent down and cut the man's throat with his kunai, silencing his scream. He dragged the man out of the tent and dumped him in the middle of the street so his body wouldn't burn because of the wet mud. Takuma left the dead body there and shot towards the next area of disruption with body flicker jutsu. It was dangerous to use the jutsu because it was hard to control, which was why it wasn't used in combat and Takuma could rush into a ninjutsu. When Takuma arrived, he saw another black-clad man standing over and kneeling down Takashi, the Hidden Leaf genin who was temporarily helping out at the camp. The black-clad man raised his sword. No! Yelled Takuma as he rushed towards them. Swing thud, Takashi's head rolled on the ground. His body collapsed beside him a moment later. Takuma stopped in his tracks in disbelief and stared at the upside-down face of the man who had helped him a few hours ago as the blood from his neck dripped down onto his face, which was frozen in terror. The cacophony of crackling fire, destruction, and screams around the camp struck Takuma simultaneously as his vision was focused on Takashi. He looked up at the black-clad man, who was now staring at him. At that moment, as Takuma clutched the kunai in his hand, he knew one thing. He was going to murder the man before him if it was the last thing he did. He let out a battle cry as he charged for the man, who ran towards Takuma with his sword raised. Their weapons clashed. The katana was a two-handed weapon, but Takuma had one hand free. He went in for a throat-crushing augmented strike. The man pushed his sword forward, throwing Takuma's balance. Takuma took a step back to stabilize him and pressed ahead with aggression. The two shinobi got locked in a deadly dance where Takuma pushed, and the black-clad shinobi received every strike with practiced grace. Takuma struck his kunai and free hand as his feet remained on the ground, providing a solid foundation in the wet mud. His opponent's kenjutsu was some of the most skillful he had faced. The man used his sword to keep Takuma at a distance, a solid defense and deadly offense that threatened to dissect Takuma if he wasn't careful. Suddenly, the man switched gears. He exploited a gap in Takuma's aggression and, with one step forward, thrashed his sword down at Takuma repeatedly, who could only use one short kunai to estimate each downward deadly strike. Crack! Takuma's kunai snapped in half under the heavy strikes, and the sword blade sliced down at him. Thankfully for Takuma, his chainmail took the weakened swing, leaving him almost uninjured from the attack. With the sword at the lowest point of the swing, Takuma took a step forward and slammed his forehead into the man's face. As the man faltered, Takuma followed with a spinning kick to the head. But as he stepped ahead for a finishing strike, the man unleashed a lightning-quick horizontal sword swing that missed Takuma only by a couple centimeters, but it did the job of stopping Takuma, giving the man enough time to jump away to create some distance. Both shinobi stared at each other as they slowly moved in a circle. The opponent was tough. He was weaker than the Chunin Takuma had faced during the farm raid, but he was stronger than any of the assassins who had come for him. The man changed his grip on the sword to weave hand seals. A streak of lightning sparked across the sword blade. Takuma's instincts screamed danger. As the man dashed toward him, Takuma weaved hand seals before pressing his hands into the ground. Chakra seeped into the ground, and the wet mud rose around Takuma, solidifying under his command. Earth and dome. The lightning-covered sword sliced the top of the dome like a hot knife through butter, but the rest of the dome stood. Earth was weak to lightning. The man eyed the opening he had made. Takuma was kneeling in the dome. The man switched his grip to a two-handed reverse grip to stab the sword down into the hole. But before he could push the sword in, a kunai flew out, almost impaling itself in the head if not for the man to shift his head at the last moment. The kunai nicked him at the place where the neck met the shoulder. The surprise broke the jutsu on the sword. The man's eye naturally tried to look into the hole, but there was nothing but darkness inside the dome. Takuma was gone. But then he noticed something casting a glow on the ground. Confused but wanting to find Takuma immediately, he turned away. Two explosive tags stuck to the dome wall exploded, and the dome's hardened earth became equivalent to pseudo-grenade pellets, slamming into the unprepared man along with the force of the raw explosion from the tags themselves. A distance away from the dome, Takuma emerged from within the ground. Hiding in the rock jutsu, the man had flown in Takuma's direction. Seeing him on the ground, Takuma charged, adamant to end the fight. The man pushed himself using his sword as support. He saw Takuma rushing toward him. His clothes were torn into shreds, revealing burned skin under a chainmail. There was blood dripping down the side of his head. With trembling hands, he weaved hand seals. Thick lightning arcs snaked around his arm, merging into one bolt that then shot toward Takuma. Lightning style, lightning bolt jutsu. It was a delicate play of timing. The moment Takuma saw the lightning arcs of the crank jutsu, he prepared himself. With every muscle tensed in his body, Takuma dropped into a forward sliding tackle at the precise moment before the lightning bolt left the man's hand. The laser-quick lightning-style jutsu covered the distance in the blink of an eye. Takuma felt every hair on his body rise as the lightning bolt shot past above him. He breathed out and seamlessly got up and jumped up before coming down to slam an augmented fist into the man's jaw. The man went down, but he didn't go down. He tried to raise his sword to protect himself. Takuma threw a kunai with as much force as he could muster. It pierced the man's wrist, coming out the other way. The man screamed as he dropped his sword. Takuma slammed another augmented kick into the ribs to put the bastard down. He equipped another kunai and went in for the kill. "No, don't kill him." A woman's voice sounded in the distance. But it was already too late. Takuma had already released the kunai. It went clean into the man's throat. It didn't matter either way. Takuma was too angry. He raised his leg and kicked in the kunai deeper into the man's throat, ending his life if there was any doubt otherwise. Takuma didn't ease up and immediately turned towards the voice with a kunai ready in his hand for another opponent. Standing a few meters away was a young woman. Takuma's first instinct was to take her down, but then he noticed her clothes. She was wearing a hidden steam shinobi uniform. Takuma released a deep breath. He didn't put his guard down. The woman could be one of the camp raiders, dressed in hidden steam colors to deceive people. Before either of them could say anything, Takuma noticed a civilian man running away from the camp with a child in his arms. "No," Takuma muttered, a horrifying thought emerging in his mind. He turned back and shot forward with the body flicker jutsu, ignoring the woman calling out for him. A few seconds later, Takuma stood in front of the camp he was planning to sleep in for the night. The was on fire, the flames covering the entirety of the shelter as they rose to the sky. The structure had long collapsed. Takuma saw none of that. He weaved hand seals faster than ever in his life. Water style, wild water wave. He controlled the flow of the wave to spread the water all over the tent. The flames subsided, but the fire didn't go out completely, so he weaved hand seals again. And again. By the time Takuma rushed into the tent, his logical mind had caught up to his actions. A fear grew larger from the corner of his heart. Another part of him didn't want to accept it. They must have gotten out before the tent burned out. In the tent, Takuma looked around, and he found what he feared. He dropped to his knees and broke down when he saw what lay beside burnt dolls. Chapter 174, 4 Genin were in charge of managing the camp with more than 400 people. 3 of them were hidden steam shinobi, while the 4th shinobi was a hidden leaf shinobi helping out until hidden steam could replace him with one of their own. The 4 shinobi had hired people from the camp itself to manage the sheer number of people. Yari was a hidden steam shinobi managing the camp. She was one of the 2 shinobi present on the camp during the incursion, the second being Takashi of the Hidden Leaf. The other 2 were out visiting the town for food and drinks. The camp was significantly distant from the conflict. There was no reason for enemy shinobi to be this deep in the land of hot waters. This was why only 4 genin were assigned to the camp. Shinobi weren't needed to manage the camp, civilians could have done it on their own, showcased by the fact that the hidden steam was taking such a long time to replace the hidden leaf Shinobi loaned out to them. The 4 Shinobi weren't expecting an attack and were thus lax on security and focusing more on ensuring the refugees were adequately managed. The incursion happened very quickly. By the time Yeri got out of her tent, 2 rows of tents were already on intense fire. The first thing she saw was a great fireball rolling through tents in the distance. She and Takashi sprinted to the different parts of the camp and found black-clad Shinobi causing destruction, mindlessly killing civilians, women, children, elderly. No one was spared. She understood that they were outnumbered when she found the first enemy. If she and Takashi were occupied by an enemy each, the rest could continue to wreak havoc on civilians powerless to stop Shinobi. The remaining 2 Shinobi needed to return quickly, which they thankfully did. The violent fires were big enough to be seen from the nearby town. Yeri finished off her first intruder in exchange of suffering some injuries. The next intruder wasn't difficult and surrendered with little effort when she was joined by the other 2 hidden steam Shinobi. From the looks of it, Takashi had taken out an intruder before he died at the hands of another. And there was the other guy. Takashi had told them that a hidden leaf Shinobi was using the camp as a rest point on his travels to a border camp. They had no problems because of how little the Shinobi had asked for such a short time. So when Yeri saw a teenager fighting an intruder, she realized it was the hidden leaf Shinobi. Yeri was grateful to him, but she didn't appreciate him ignoring her ask to capture the intruder instead of killing him. In cases like this, it was better for them to interrogate captives for information rather than kill them. They already had 1 captive, but it was always better to have at least 2 in case one of them didn't have complete facts or use 2 people to verify each other's information. But things didn't stop there. She glanced at the hidden leaf Shinobi, who had introduced himself as Takuma, sitting in the corner of the tent. His breathing was labored, he was sweating a lot, and he was clutching a cane in his hands, but other than that, there was not even a single scratch on him. Just how much chakra does he have? She thought. The man had single-handedly put almost all the fires in the camp with his water-style jutsu. It prevented a lot of loss because of the quick action. She was eternally grateful for that. And yet, the camp was ruined, people had lost lives, and those who lived had lost their belongings. The war refugees who had been uprooted from their homes had lost their place of stay for the second time. Yeri clenched her jaw. She could still hear the screams, the smell of smoke made her feel nauseous. She was charged to keep the refugees safe, but she wasn't able to do a thing. She had failed miserably. Everywhere she looked, her failure was thrown back at her. The people who had lost their partners, the parents who had lost their children, the children who were now orphans, everything was her fault. Is the prisoner ready? Asked Takuma. Yeri turned to see that Takuma now looked better than before. The other 2 are interrogating him, she replied. He stood up, and his cane clicked as he walked to the other tent. Yeri followed after him. What are you going to do? I would like to ask some questions as well, he said. As they entered the tent with the prisoner, Yeri stepped in front of Takuma. I'm sorry, but I can't let you do that. She was grateful to Takuma for the help he had provided, but she knew nothing about him. And this was the land of hot waters matter, and she, as a hidden steam Shinobi, couldn't let an outsider interfere. Miss, one of our brave Shinobi died during this incursion. The hidden leaf will be more appreciative of our allies if they were cooperative in this matter, said Takuma. Yeri narrowed her eyes. Hidden leaf? Was this Takuma some big shot? Was that why Takashi had let him stay without asking them? We lost a third of the civilians in the camp. More than 100 people died. We can't just let you do anything to the prisoner, she said. I simply wish to know the reason behind the attack so I can report it to my superiors, miss, so they will know why a shinobi so far from the battlefield is now dead, so they have something to tell to Genin Takashi's family. I'm not asking you to release him in my custody. He will remain Hidden Steam's prisoner of war until both of our superiors decide otherwise, he said. Yeri bit the inside of her cheeks. She didn't trust him. He had killed 2 intruders already. And with Takashi dead, he might kill the last one in revenge as well. If she had to be honest, Yeri didn't care if the prisoner died. The bastard was the reason why her countrymen were dead. She wished that he would die a horrifying death, and at the moment, she wanted nothing but to be the one to kill him, but she knew they needed him alive for his information. You can't kill him, she said. I simply wish to have some questions answered, miss. Yeri stared at him, thinking about her decision one last, before stepping aside and letting him proceed. Inside the tent, the last living intruder lay on the floor with only his underwear on his body, his hands and feet bound with thick iron chains. His face was swollen beyond recognition, and blue-black bruises covered his body. The 2 hidden steam shinobi had done a number on him. Takuma didn't go to the prisoner and instead turned to the table with the shinobi's belongings. What are you doing? asked Yeri. Takuma didn't answer and ruffled through the belongings. Yeri didn't see the point. They had already searched their belongings for clues, but they didn't carry anything else but weapons, rations, and other shinobi equipment. You wouldn't find anything, she said. They were clearly here for a covert mission. I don't think they would carry anything that would connect back. Takuma held up a kunai. This is a kunai design used by the Hidden Frost. It's a very successful design, used by more than a third of the Hidden Frost shinobi. Yeri stared at the kunai. She had no idea the kunai was from the Hidden Frost. To her, it looked like any other kunai she carried. Maybe the hilt was a bit shorter than hers. Does that mean they are from the Hidden Frost? Yeri asked, her fist clenched. Most probably, but it doesn't matter. The Hidden Frost could simply deny any involvement and declare them rogue elements. The fact all of their gear is of the easily purchased variety makes it another dead end. Not even a blacksmith's touch mark to track. Then what are you doing? She asked. Takuma didn't reply and continued to go through the belongings. He turned their clothes upside down, checked every kunai and shuriken, eyed the explosive tags, leaving nothing untouched. Rip. Takuma ripped the weapons pouch, and his hands went still. People would like to believe that humans are a logical species, but the truth of the matter is that we're illogical beings who often ignore logic and operate on emotions. Drug addicts would not throw away their hidden stash even when they're at risk of their house being investigated. That's just how our minds are wired. I believe it's one of our strengths that brings us together. From the 2 layers of torn leather, Takuma pulled out a photograph from a hidden pocket, but it's also our biggest flaw that ruins people if they don't keep it under check. Yeri gazed at the photograph of a man, woman, and child. It was very clearly a family photograph. She stared at the man in the picture and turned to their prisoner. The man smiling in the photograph was lying beaten in the dirt a few feet from her. Takuma pocketed the photo and walked out of the tent. Where are you going? Yeri asked as she followed him. He went to the tent and lifted the metal table, a sturdy metal sheet as the tabletop supported by 4 legs. He carried the table into the prisoner's tent and used 2 bricks to prop one side of the table higher than the other. Lay him on the table, said Takuma as he once again went out to bring in 2 buckets full of water on a rag. Make sure we never run out of the water, he said to one of the hidden steam shinobi as he filled his canteen with dirty water. Yeri understood what Takuma was trying to do. Are you sure you can do that? She asked. It was quite easy to accidentally kill someone during waterboarding. I usually outsource my tough interrogations to a professional, but I have seen her work enough to give it a try, said Takuma. He took out a hidden leaf forehead protector and tied it around his head before turning to the prisoner. Let's face the truth here, Takuma said to the prisoner. You're captured, all your companions are dead, and you are deep in enemy territory. There's no help coming for you, you're all alone, and it's in your best interest to cooperate because they can make your life hell if we want. So, answer our questions, and I will personally ensure that you don't suffer anymore. The prisoner stared at Takuma, both of his eyes swollen until the eyes were only a slit. The prisoner chuckled before spitting some blood to the side. Are you sure? One more chance before we start. The prisoner stayed silent. Takuma sighed. Let's begin then, he said as he put the rag on the prisoner's face and poured the water on the nose from the canteen. Yeri narrowed her eyes as the prisoner began to struggle against his restraint as the water entered him. She didn't know how it felt, but from what she had heard, the feeling was worse than being drowned and then being pulled out for a moment before being drowned again and again until it became unbearable. Takuma poured the water as the 2 hidden steam shinobi held the man down. A few seconds later, he removed the rag and asked the prisoner if he was ready to answer a question. The prisoner wheezed and coughed, but said nothing, so Takuma put the rag on again and started waterboarding. Listen, you just killed hundreds of civilians. After that, it's natural that these people, Takuma pointed to the hidden steam shinobi, won't care what happens to you. There's a war going on, and you're a prisoner of war. Your future is bleak, but if you tell me what I want to know, I will ensure you're safe. Takuma pointed at his forehead. See? I'm a hidden leaf shinobi. I don't have the grudge they have for you. The 2 hidden steam shinobi seemed not to like Takuma's statements, but Yeri raised her hands and made them stop. The prisoner refused to talk. He was again put through the process. Believe it or not, but I'm the closest thing to a friend you can get in a situation like this. I don't know what the people back home told you, but getting caught here isn't the end of your life. Prisoners of war get released all the time. One day, this war will end, and the 2 nations will make merry. That day, they will use pawns like you and me as peace gestures. Prisoners will be released, and you will be back home, happy to be alive. Your concern right now should be to remain alive in one piece. Adapting to these new circumstances is the top priority. I can make that easy for you. Oh no, you can't go dark on me. Hey, wake up. Good. So, where was I? Okay, Forget everything I said, let's start one simple question at a time. What's your name? My name is Toby. Why did you come here? What route did you use to breach the border? What was the purpose behind this attack? Do you have any additional objectives other than this camp? Do you have a handler in the land of hot waters to help you coordinate, or was your team an independent operation? The interrogation process continued, and after a little over an hour of being waterboarded, Takuma stopped and exited the tent. Yari thought that he had given up, but she was wrong. Giving him a break will allow him to catch his breath, and calm himself down to the point he could think in peace. When he tastes that peace, the return to torture will be more impactful, he said. When will you use that photo? She asked. Takuma replied that it was not time yet. That day, Takuma held 4 sessions of 1 hour each. They had begun a few hours before sunrise, and by the time they had ended the 4th session, it was already 10 hours, and the day had already reached the early afternoon. Takuma told them to rest for a few hours before announcing they would start another cycle of 4 waterboarding sessions. In the middle of the evening, they began again. The same table, the rag, and the source of water. The questions were repeated. But there was no reprieve as long as the prisoner refused to answer their questions. This time, though, Takuma went through phases of chatting with the prisoner mixed in with periods of silence where no questions were asked. No matter how much the prisoner begged to stop, no one said anything to him. Yari held no pity for the prisoner, but this was her first time seeing someone tortured for information, and the sight of Takuma standing beside the chained prisoner whom her hidden steam companions were pinning down was something that instilled fear in her. At one point, the prisoner thrashed so much when he was having water forced down into his body that he broke a bone in his arm, which scared Yari if Takuma was going too far. When she asked her 2 companions, they seemed to lack any nervousness she felt. Takuma remained indifferent through the entire process. He would be animated in the tent with the prisoner, but during the break, he would sit near the tent's entrance, keeping an eye on the prisoner in silence. While the hidden steam shinobi used the breaks to help the town civilians clean up the destroyed camp, and smooth out the temporary establishment for the remaining refugees, Takuma seemed to be cut off from the rest of the world. Eventually, the last session of the 2nd cycle arrived. The sun had already set, and everyone was tired. It's time, Takuma said as the final break of the day came to an end. What? Asked Yari. Takuma stood up and walked into the tent. The moment they entered the tent, the shivering prisoner began to struggle against his restraints. His breathing became labored, and there was fear in his bloodshot eyes as he squirmed on the floor. Are you ready to answer the questions? Asked Takuma. The prisoner started begging to spare him, and his pleading became louder as the hidden steam shinobi placed him atop the raised table. The prisoner was waterboarded once before Takuma stopped and spoke to the prisoner. This is the last session. Tomorrow, they will take you to the hidden steam. You're one tough man, my friend. Which is why a Yamanaka of the hidden leaf will be waiting for you there. If you don't know, Yamanaka have special ninjutsu, which allows them to mind read. They will pull all the information out of your mind. I don't know if it will be painful or not. The prisoner looked horrified, but at the same time, he looked peaceful. Perhaps now that he knew his suffering was only for a little more, he relaxed. But then Takuma pulled out the photograph and held it before the prisoner's face. I'm going to give this picture of you and your family to them. The hidden steam wants revenge for the people you murdered. After they find the identities of your companions, they will send a team to all your homes who will kill your families. Your family will be included, of course. Yari stared at the prisoner whose trembling eyes were glued to the photo. But if you promise me to answer our questions here and now, there will be no need for the hidden steam to pay for the Yamanaka. They're at war, and Yamanaka's services are costly. You can save your family by answering the questions. That's the best I can do for you, my friend. The prisoner looked at Takuma, who urged him to talk. Spare my family, said the prisoner. The prisoner had broken down. In the next hour, the prisoner told them everything he knew. His team was tasked to infiltrate the land of hot steams and set a camp on fire with the objective of killing as many as possible. Their motive was to cause chaos and crush the morale of the hidden steam shinobi and the entire land of hot waters by causing a tragedy while also stressing the forces on the border to stretch themselves thin to cover a greater area to plug potential routes. They had chosen the camp because they had gotten the information that it was the nearest camp of substantial size from the border with very low security. Their team of 5 people, which included 1 Chunin, was deemed enough to complete the objective. According to the prisoner, they were to report a handler waiting for them in a major city in the land of hot waters where they would get further instructions. The prisoner didn't know who the handler was, but he gave up his handler's location. He also gave up the route he took to breach the border and who else was involved. After Yari ensured the prisoner was properly secured, she headed to the other tent, where she noticed Takuma staring at a doll in his hands. He must have noticed her as he put the doll into his backpack. Do you need something, miss? He asked without looking at her. A Chunin will be arriving tomorrow to assess the situation, she said. I will leave by sunrise, he replied. I had given myself 1 day of leeway, which I ended up using here. I hope you will ensure that Genin Takashi's personal belongings and his ashes will find their way to his family. The first thing Takuma had done after putting out the fires was to give Takashi a shinobi's funeral. They had offered to help, but he had refused and completed all the preparations and rites by himself. Yari nodded. Did you torture him for 2 days for revenge when you had that photograph from the start? She asked. Takuma turned to face her. He wouldn't have believed me if I had threatened his family from the start. It's completely illogical for the hidden steam to target a Genin's family deep within a land of frost as revenge. I needed to break down his mental state to the point where he would have believed the threat as something possible. She noticed Takuma hadn't refused her query. Please let me see you off tomorrow, she said. But the next day, when she and her companions woke up, Takuma had already left. Chapter 175. As much as he found the great outdoors, there was no joy in the last leg of his journey. Not sleeping for 2 days was not something Takuma couldn't bear, but with the travel and the refugee camp incident, his brain felt like a searing mess, and his muscles felt like lead had been pumped into them. The beauty of the countryside didn't mesmerize him, the heaviness of his boots caked with mud didn't irritate him. Nothing mattered as he ran across the foreign lands to fight a war that had nothing to do with his nation. He couldn't shut his brain down and mindlessly run. The events of the past 2 days swam around his mind, refusing to leave. He couldn't help but think about Takashi and the 2 families he had spent time with. All of them were good people. Takashi was so elated to return home, and the children were the bright spot in the 2 families' dance. Even when the times were rough, none of them were alive now. I should have killed him. As he recalled the prisoner, he felt a raging, burning sensation in his heart. The man's begging was akin to nails against a chalkboard. There were so many times he wanted to end the man's life for the sins he had committed, but Taro's mom's words kept him from displaying any of his true feelings during the investigation. The suspect cannot ever be allowed to see frustration or difficulty in the interrogator's eyes. The moment they see that, the control passes over to their hand. She was the one Takuma always called for difficult interrogations, and because her services cost so much money, he was always there in the co-joined room with members of his team to observe her process through the one-sided window to get a learning experience out of it. The little he knew, it came from her. Takuma pushed his anger down as he saw tall earthen walls come into view. He had arrived at his destination. His destination, the camp, was once a village that had been vacated due to the danger from the Land of Frost forces who had breached the border and occupied the Land of Hot Water's territory. Due to the infrastructure and its strategic position, the shinobi forces had now occupied the village as their base of operation. Takuma couldn't help but recall Miwa's recollection of her own village and how this village was once home to people. Takuma slowed down to a walk as a giant gate made from tall tree logs came into view. It was partially open, giving him a peek of the village inside. As he approached the gates, he noticed 2 guards standing guard with one more guard on the wall, half of his body covered by the wall, making it seem he was standing on a platform attached to the wall. Halt, identify yourself, shouted one of the guards. Both the guards wore Hidden Leaf shinobi uniforms. Genin Takuma, Hidden Leaf, reporting for duty, Takuma said. The 2 guards exchanged glances. We weren't informed about any arrivals today. I have documents. Takuma wasn't in the mood to argue. After getting the permission, he took out a transparent pouch with his important documents. He handed them the documents necessary to prove his identity and deployment order. People are usually deployed in groups. Why are you alone? Genin Takuma? Asked the guard, reading his documents. Takuma pointed to the cane strapped to the side of his bag along with his hand axe. An injury postponed my deployment. The guard hummed. Wait here. I will go get these documents verified. Don't cause any trouble. The guards showed not a hint of hospitality from their actions, expressions, and body language. As the guard disappeared behind the gates, the second guard stood in his post, his vigilant eye fixed on Takuma. Takuma felt another gaze on him and glanced up at the wall. The shinobi atop the wall was gazing down at him. He had a kunai with an explosive tag dangling from his hand. The 2 guards made Takuma feel tense. He would have tried to chat with them, but he felt exhausted, so he sat down on the ground beside his backpack. He emptied his canteen in one big gulp and then stared at the ground, waiting for the guard to return. It took the guard 10 minutes to return. Your documents checked out, and your arrival has been verified. Welcome to Camp Banana, Genin Takuma, announced the guard. He had a smile on his face this time. The other guard eased, smiles appeared on his face. The guard on the wall pulled his kunai back and gave Takuma a wave. The sudden change in attitude was surprising, but for some reason, it put him at ease. The guards were taking their jobs to keep the camp safe seriously. Takuma stood up and shook the guards' hands as they introduced themselves to him. The second guard even patted him on the back as the first guard led him into Camp Banana. Camp Banana has 2 hidden leaf jonin as its command. The guard started as they walked across the village. Takuma saw houses, shops, flattened roads, carts, barrels, haystacks, and everything one would expect in a small village, and the village didn't seem abandoned as shinobi had replaced the villagers. I'm taking you to meet Jonin Toradasa Kasauri. Will I be serving under him? Asked Takuma. You will be a part of his chain of command, the guard nodded. The other Jonin is Jonin Shirakamu Hayama. Both Jonin have their own chain of commands serving under them, and for the most part, they both operate independently, but Jonin Toradasa holds the final say in critical matters and disputes. Takuma furrowed his brow. 2 Jonin sharing the command? He found it unusual. A chain of command needed to be clear so people knew who to report to. Even though the narcotics task force was small and a flat hierarchy would have worked, Takuma had installed a clear chain of command to establish some structure in the inexperienced group. Having 2 Jonin share power didn't seem efficient, and he could see things go wrong even if one of the Jonin held a higher authority. You will only report to Jonin Toradasa's chain of command. Understood? Said the guard. Takuma replied in affirmation. He was then led into a 2-story building near the village center. A hidden leaf shinobi sat on a desk opposite the door. The woman looked up at the guard and then at Takuma. Are you Geinin Takuma? She asked. Yes, ma'am, said Takuma. Jonin Toradasa will see you now. Head in, the woman pointed to a door. Takuma thanked the guard, took a deep breath, put on his forehead protector, and knocked on the door. Come in, said the voice. Takuma stepped inside the Jonin's office and was immediately surprised because he actually recognized the man. Geinin Takuma, Jonin Toradasa. Without any niceties, I must say that I don't have a stellar first impression of you. You're not late, but I expected you to arrive at least a day early. That much should be common sense. I require a certain standard from subordinates, and I hope that you will be able to withhold that standard. The man looked. He had already stepped across 50. He had a bald head, a round face, and a pudgy body. While every shinobi he had passed wore the uniform, Toradasa wore a flashy dark red kimono with a wood-brown hari over it. The kimono was tied using a sash with a hidden leaf forehead protector sewn in the front. My apologies, sir. I intended to arrive yesterday, but an incident delayed me, said Takuma. His heart felt heavy. He hadn't been in the camp for an hour, and his commanding officer's impression of him was already less than optimal. And what might that incident be? Said Toradasa. His eyes said, this better not be an excuse. A refugee camp I was using as a rest point was attacked while I was staying there. I had to delay my journey as I helped manage the situation, Takuma replied. He was ready to explain it all even though he had no desire to talk about it. I know about the attack. It was part of today's information packet. Toradasa looked surprised. And you're saying you were involved? How would that be? I was present during the incursion and was involved in subduing the intruders. Takuma started. Out of the 5 intruders, we were able to secure 1 for interrogation. After the initial chaos settled, I interrogated the prisoner for information. The interrogation tied me up that I had to delay my schedule. You interrogated the prisoner? Ah, you have a police force background, Toradasa nodded. Walk me through it. The packet must have been sent out early. It didn't have any mentions of extracted intel. Takuma walked Toradasa through the process and the intel he had extracted. Toradasa listened without interrupting until the end. This is troubling, Toradasa sighed. The incident would put pressure on us to be aggressive in territory reclamation. I will have to discuss this with Hayama, he muttered the last sentence. It seems I was wrong about you, Geinin Takuma. You did good. It's a pleasure to meet you, and I welcome you to Camp Banana. Thank you, sir, Takuma bowed. But we have met once before, sir. Oh? I don't remember meeting you though, Geinin Takuma. It was for a very short time, but you were the invigilator for my academy graduation exam. You had asked me a trick question about how many shinobi stood in the exam hall. One of them was sitting. Toradasa stared at Takuma for a moment. I think I vaguely remember you, it has been many years. But what a coincidence for us to meet here. That was the only year one volunteered to oversee the academy graduation examinations, said Toradasa. Gina. Called Toradasa. A moment later, the woman shinobi from before walked in. Please introduce Geinin Takuma to his Chunin team leader. Toradasa turned to Takuma. You will be serving under her. Get yourself familiar with the team, they will be your family while you are in this camp. The Geinin named Gina led Takuma through the village. She didn't say a word to him, but neither did Takuma initiate the conversation. He was tired, but knew that his first impression on his team was important, so he built up his energy so he could at least force himself to be his normal self until he had a chance to rest. In the western part of the village, there was a residential area. Gina and Takuma stopped in front of a single-story home. She walked to the door and knocked. Chunin Mitarashi. Gainin Takuma, your new subordinate, has arrived, she shouted. Mitarashi? Takuma wondered where he had that family name. Pipe down, no need to break the door down, a woman's voice came from inside. I'm coming out. Give me a moment, for God's sake. Gina sighed before stepping back. A few moments later, the door opened, and a young woman in her late teens stepped out of the house. She was an average-sized woman with a slender frame. She had light brown eyes. Her hair was of a dull violet color, styled in a short, spiky, fanned-out ponytail. Oh, so you're Takuma, huh, she said. Nice to meet you. I'm Mitarashi Anko. Let's get along, right?